Special town meeting, we're getting into annual town meeting and articles that are coming up, and there was a lot of discussion about, articles going on the warrant. One had come up about marijuana, both retail and cultivating, so retail, selling storefront and cultivating being growing. Someone had come to us, which I think some of the gentlemen are here in the audience, kind of asking if Foxborough had an appetite to revisit that again since about 2017. And during that discussion, I mentioned, I think culturally, Foxborough is a community that wants to know what's going to happen. They want to know what's going to look like, is more than like vague general ideas, especially when it comes to this. So we had talked about, maybe a citizen's petition being the best route to go for them. And then, come to find out, per their attorney, it was maybe not the best way to go because they could do the citizen's petition, and then someone could come in and take that license essentially from them. So it brings up the idea, of the planning board, of the Board of Selectmen supporting a marijuana article to go on the warrant. It's not like we'd take a vote tonight and it moves forward, but do we want to put this on the warrant for it to go down the process, since it is zoning, to go to planning board, public hearings, town meeting, and everything again like it did in 2017. For me personally, I think in 2017, it was kind of a scary and new thing. I know I remember sitting in town meeting and voting against it. Here we are now, 5 years later. It's all around us in Mansfield, Sharon, even a community like Sharon, I know, probably one of the most conservative communities around here, have made the switch, and it hasn't, at least from me, looking from another town, it hasn't had a big impact besides possibly financially helping them.
Could you just be specific on made the switch to what?
To allow marijuana.
Like
The sale.
Sales.
Well, they'd be separate, sale or cultivation. So I think the town would have to say, do they want to allow one, either, both, neither?
Yep, so sales means a dispensary?
Yeah, retail, yep.
Yep, okay.
Cultivation, I just learned this all too, means actually growing it. So you could cultivate it and not retail it, or you could retail and not cultivate, or you could do both.
Yep. Got it, thank you.
So with this coming to us, and it was right around special town meeting. I think it might have been the week after, so there was plenty of time leading up to it. I am open to it going back onto the warrant, to be looked at again through all the long process that it goes through. But I wanted to have a discussion with the board to see if that's something that you guys would be in favor of placing on the warrant. So
I agree with you, things have changed, and it's not, because there's so many, I'm driving to my parents in Stoughton, and I drive by two of them that are like 150 yards apart from each other. What I've heard, I don't know a ton about it, but what I've heard is the communities that are hosting really benefit financially. Would you know that, Bill? That's what I've heard. I don't know if it's true or not.
They actually do.
yeah, and I think would have to have that would be a discussion would have to have, and would have to, what does zoning look like? Where is it appropriate? I don't think anyone thinks like uptown is appropriate, but is maybe, industrial or Route 1, or so there's a lot of conversations that would kind of come in education.
Yeah. And I think the people that did come forward that were interested, I mean, they were going to clean up that right on Route 1, that little gas station corner. It was just a mess there. They were going to come in, clean it up, and there wasn't an appetite for it at that time. I mean, everybody was just like, no. But the thing is, it's if you can go to these other communities that are right around the corner from us and they're benefiting, I think for me, it'd be worth just looking into again. Anyhow.
Yeah, I think two things historically. One, the place on North Street and Route 1, that was a close vote. That was a 3-2 vote not to have it. There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of press in the paper on both sides. And that was going to be the medical dispensary. You needed a medical marijuana card to get that. And then the other thing, when we voted it down at town meeting, I think it was so early in the process of legalizing marijuana that I think the tact we took as a board at that time was, we don't know where it's going. We don't know what the regulations and the state was going to be. And I think we voted it down, and I always forget the legal term, with prejudice, without prejudice, meaning, I think it was without prejudice,
Well, it was just,
that we could bring it back again, and the only reason we're voting it down was because there was too much ambiguity at that time. So I think this is a good time to bring it up, bring it back to the town, have a good, strong discussion, some good history, find out what some of the other communities are doing.
And it is a zoning article, so it will require 2/3. Am I correct or incorrect on that?
I think that's true, yeah.
I believe it would. So it would be us putting it on, but it would really be planning board, from what I understand, that would kind of shepherd a lot of the public hearings and the education, and we could join. And I imagine that Mr. Weinfeld will have conversations with his board to see how they are feeling. I think both boards would have to, be in favor of at least putting it forward to have the discussions to move on. I think there'd be a vote later in the process, after everyone's educated. Seth?
Understood.
Okay. So any objections with us putting a placeholder to revisit this again on the warrant?
Not for me.
No? Okay. Okay, so I think that there's a lot more to come, but I think that this board is supporting putting it on the warrant to talk about it more.
Correct.
Mr. Dudley? Do you mind just coming up? And just let everyone know who you are?
Sure.
Although I think most people know.
They may or may not, but I'm Bill Dudley, 36 North Grove Street. So I have a question for all of you. Are you going to talk about the human cost and when you do your analysis as to whether this should be in Foxborough?
I think we'll explore every avenue.
Because I've taken part in burying a number of kids from drug overdoses in this town. Drug deaths are skyrocketing all across the country, and it's obvious the connection with marijuana as a gateway drug, including legally sold, legally, not so much morally, sold, including in Foxborough. There's a human cost to this. So before we glibly look at the money, I have a whole history to give you here at an appropriate time. So I'm wondering if that will be part of your conversation.
Yes, and, but Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but since this is a planning one, there'd be a public hearing. It is also meetings with the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, but there would actually be a public hearing where the public could come in.
You're making a decision tonight, though.
We're making a decision not to support the article, just to put it on the warrant. So it will go on the warrant.
So you could make a decision not to.
We could make a decision not to put on the warrant, yes.
So I would make the decision not to. I didn't think that was necessarily any vote or anything, but if maybe it was 3-1, or maybe it was 2-2, or I don't know, but I'm in favor of what Mr. Dudley's
Okay.
speaking about, so.
Okay. All right. I don't know, Bill, I'm looking at you if you need a formal vote for us now, or if that's when the warrant article comes out. What is the timing of this look
Well,
like?
right now, there is no article,
Right.
so until someone presents something, it's really, all you did was have a conversation tonight about whether or not you entertain such an article to come forward, and whether it would be worth a person to present one, a person's effort to present one. So, and if somebody wants to present one, that'd be the time to say no, but if you're not interested at all, that's also important to let people know that too.
So it sounds like the applicant is not looking to put forward a citizen's petition any longer, and this is looking to have it be a Board of Selectmen sponsored article, from what I understand.
I do believe that there's a technical concern here that if it's just put out there by an individual, then they could go through all the effort to put it out there, and then have the license actually taken by someone else, because if they offer a better offer than someone else does to get the license, then it could be taken right from underneath them if they go through all the effort. So that's the issue, and whether or not it makes sense for there's also the other avenue that to determine whether or not the town itself is comfortable with the concept of doing it. And The board may recall this, but you actually did a citizens, a non-binding referendum on this issue that came up just prior to the election, but just prior to the town meeting action on this, back in 2017. And maybe that's a way to, get this discussion going again, is to see if and how the community feels about this issue at this point.
Okay, so it would go on as like a ballot question, and
It would go
then
on as a ballot
if
question.
it
and then-
passes as the ballot question, then it moves
And then,
forward.
and if it was supported, obviously, there wouldn't be enough time between the election and the town meeting to actually have it, unless they were submitted at the same time. Then the board could, then the town could act on it at that point. But the alternative action would be to see what the town says and then present something maybe in the fall. There's another option.
I mean, I'm in favor, I'm not saying I'm in favor of voting for it, we'll all sit at town meeting and we'll all vote for it as a town, but I'm in favor of putting it on the warrant to hear more and have those discussions and have those public hearings. And it is one of these issues that there's people on either side of it strongly, and to hear both sides of those.
I am as well. I think everything you just said, Mr. Dudley, will come up.
Completely.
For whether it's people who don't. I personally, I don't use marijuana, but I know lots of people that do, and to your point, I would say that what you're hearing now too is that with all the fentanyl, now it's like, they're finding it in everything. They're pressing pills, they're lacing marijuana with it, everything. I'm not gonna argue with anybody, whether it's the gateway to further drug use or everything. All that stuff has been, has been laid out. But I will say that the people who are going to use marijuana are gonna get it somewhere. And if it's a safe way for them to get it compared to buying it on the street, like I said, it's not gonna affect me personally one way or the other.
It's not
And,
safe.
And so, but I think all of that will come up in discussions. I don't want to speak for the whole board. I don't think we're sitting here tonight and saying, yay, we're moving forward with this. I think it's just to be able to have
To
a
hear more.
conversation about it,
Yeah.
So I don't want you to feel that we're
Yeah.
making some decision tonight, other than letting it at least come forward for discussion.
To hear more.
Yeah.
Learn more. So do you need a vote from us? What does this look like, Bill? Where do we go from here?
So if the board wants to entertain this, then we would put together an article for a town meeting.
Okay.
We'd put a placeholder in and develop the language accordingly. I think the preliminary indication was, the last time this was visited, was that the location for this would be up on Route 1.
I think that
So,
was very strong.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that,
that
I
was pretty
feel like
strong,
that
yeah.
was, I don't know where we
so I
have
don't know,
other
I don't know of any
industrial
other
in
location
town.
in town where that would be appropriate, given the circumstances, but I do believe that was the location. So an article would have to be that, an area to be, you have to identify an area where it would be sold. And I think that there are lots of concerns, of course, on both sides of this issue, and it's one that it gets vetted quite often. And if you take a look at the facilities that are being built, they're actually quite state-of-the-art, in terms of what they look like. So they're not areas that are really detrimental to the community from, at least from a, it's not like an unsavory type of a location. But it is obviously a debatable issue, and some people feel very strongly about this, so it's obviously one that's gonna raise some concerns.
Okay.
It'll be a long night at town meeting.
Yeah.
If it does end
Yeah.
up there. Lots of discussion both
Yeah.
ways. Yeah, and I think also, didn't we have an article that you can't, why do I feel like maybe a couple of years ago on AdCom, remember the big talk about it? Don't we have an article that you can't even have a smoke shop downtown, uptown? So I'm sorry, Harding, uptown happenings. Uptown, or like vape and stuff. Didn't we have an article?
Selling
that
of
just saying
vaping
that,
products.
yeah.
I don't remember that one.
I believe
Yeah,
that's
that
the
it
case,
couldn't,
yeah.
could not be like the zoning uptown was none of that. So I think that would be huge in this article too, where it's gonna be.
And I
not-
think the planning board would also have to be on board. So although this would be
Yeah.
a board of selectmen sponsored article, I think the planning board would have to be on board to move this forward as well. So I think that they should
So the starting point would be to take a look at the area where they were considering doing it in the past, and then reevaluate that article, determine if it makes appropriate sense to move that forward for further consideration by the board when you consider the warrant.
Okay, so do you need a vote from us at this point or no?
I would think you would,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so all those in favor of moving the marijuana article forward, and I believe it would be two, from what I understand, one for retail and one for cultivation, because there may be an appetite for
correct.
one and not the other. So all those in favor? All those against? Okay. All right, so I think that we will just at least open the door to have more discussions and move that forward. There'll be plenty of other times as well to dig into this more. I know I'm interested in hearing more as well.
I spend a lot of time with people who are struggling in recovery, trying to live. And I've known a lot of people who have died. So you understand, I feel strongly about this. And there are some things, the money isn't worth it. The state of the art isn't worth it. A human life is what matters. So thanks for letting me
Thank you, Mr.
share
Dudley. I
impromptu.
completely hear and understand everything you're saying and certainly look to hearing more on it. And if I could ask you, Bill, too, to take this to, I know Paige is out, but, whatever the right means is, maybe to get
Right.
this to planning board for them to get an appetite, because I think that both boards would need to have an appetite as
Prepare a
planning
letter
board would have.
accordingly, then submit it to the planning board for consideration.
Okay, all right, great.
And just one more thing I want to add, just so even anybody at home, and just so Mr. Dudley knows, I know we talked about the money. I'm only going to speak for myself. It's not about the money, I mean, it is one factor, but if someone can drive, a mile out of town, I know exactly where you're going, and I agree with you on those points, but I just didn't want anyone to think that this is money driving
No,
us.
it's
Yeah.
definitely a sensitive topic, and,
Yeah.
people will feel very strongly on both
Yeah.
sides, and we just
Yeah,
need to, make sure
absolutely.
we have respectful conversations and hear each other out and learn more, because I don't think anyone, we're not taking a vote tonight, that'll be town meeting, and there's a lot to learn and hear from each other.
Marijuana establishment bylaw articles distributed at the last meeting, and the board wanted to have a little more time to look at the language and review, and so we could discuss it tonight. The administration is asking for the board's input on the articles. They want to know, what, if there's any concerns, if there's any changes that you would like to see, or if it's okay as it is, so that it can be included in the town meeting warrant. We need to finalize the language for the warrant.
On page. What's the difference between establishments and retailers? On page 5 and 6. Retailers, I'm assuming you can walk in and purchase. Establishments just growing.
I think it's the cultivation and the processing.
So why is S1, which is
A
Route
no.
1, why is it a no? Because that's
that-
where,
I
that's
think we
where,
talked about that last time. I think it was a mistake, wasn't it?
yeah,
I
because
think
that's,
I think that's something that should be allowed by special permit from the planning board.
agree. And then general business. What's HB again?
Highway business,
And GI
General industry.
general industrial,
and light industrial?
limited industrial.
So general business, is that, I forget where the delineation is that downtown? Or uptown?
Yeah, Yeah, you would ask that.
Sorry. Because to me, that one should, that one I would prefer to see as a no. I mean,
Okay.
and S1 is a yes. I really don't want marijuana retailer around the common.
GB is enough,
No, GB is special, no, flip the page. That's,
All right.
this is retailers.
right? Okay.
My feeling is GB should be a no, S1 should be a PB.
Okay.
And where is HB in town?
Highway business is at, on 140, area.
Like by Ocean State?
Yeah.
I thought the whole thinking of this was just to allow it on Route 1. Did I miss something?
No, I mean, I don't think that was the case. I think that was a specific for maybe an initial thing. But I
Okay.
think these other zones, as long as they were not in the central business district or the general business district, were going to be under consideration. I mean, I have no problem in us having a conversation about it, though. I'm just pointing that out.
Well, the one I think that's not correct is S1 should be planning board. Shouldn't be
Yeah,
a
that
no.
definitely.
Yeah.
General business, okay, planning board. What's NB again?
Highway business or?
No, what's NB?
Neighborhood business.
That's a no, okay.
Okay, correct.
That's a no. Those are my comments on retailers.
We're looking up the maps.
Thank you. And then for establishments, S1 should be planning board.
Right. Yeah. Was this a template from another town? We just
No, because they don't
popped all
have,
stuff in it?
they don't have the same, like NB, GI.
No, but I mean, some of the paragraphs, like where they come up with the times, 8 PM to 8 AM.
This was drafted by town council.
Because I just think they would be, because, liquor stores are open till 10 or 11. I could see these guys wanting the same times.
I mean, the ones that are already on Route 1 outside of Foxborough, they're closed. They're closed by 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see it as a problem. Did the water that's come from Sharon, down to Sharon? I don't know, maybe Kevin can shed a little light on that.
Kevin, do you know where the wording came from? Gary's thinking it came.
No, you mean the wording for this document?
Yeah,
Yes.
I believe it came through Mr. Costello.
Yeah.
okay, we didn't borrow
Oh,
it?
came from town council, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Tracy, yeah, general business, it looks like it's the downtown, the uptown area.
Yeah, for general business,
That's a no.
that's it's a no on marijuana establishments, but it's a PB on retailers. It should be a no,
Okay,
in my opinion. That's my opinion.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman? Ron or Kevin? I just, unfortunately, tonight, I had some extensive notes on this matter, which I don't have at my disposal at the present time. But I did want to ask, is it possible to get some clarity, or does anyone with this board have greater clarity, maybe Gabby, maybe professional staff, on the distinction between a zoning measure, such as we have before us here, proposed zoning, and licensing? It appeared to me on reviewing this document that there are a lot of what I would consider licensing issues or matters built into this zoning, which I've never really seen before. And so my question is, I'm not even sure, and I, you know, if things had gone a little differently today, I was going to do a little research, but is there even a local licensing element to this, or is it all done at the state level? I mean, I'd like, you know, I think we need to have some of that information as to exactly and precisely what we're being asked of here. Because if it's just a land use matter, then I think there's a lot of elements here. You were just talking a second ago, for example, about hours of operation. You know, that's not typically a land use matter.
Correct. I agree with
Typically a licensing matter. And there are other issues that I saw in this text that are similar to that. So, you know, to me, before we even got into the nitty gritty of the zoning and the land use, I must admit to some confusion about exactly how this is being handled and really what's going on. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I don't know if anyone has any insights or answers to that.
Gabby, you'd be our expert at this point. So.
No, I don't.
I mean, am I
have-
off base about that? It's just a confusion, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Attorney Costello just looked at a variety of styles of this type of legislation around, you know, the Commonwealth, and then came up with the document that we see tonight, you know, based on those things. But I agree with what Jeff is saying. I don't think that that's typical of anything that we would normally deal with. It would come down to the selectmen or the Board of Health or whatever other, you know, entity would be making those decisions relative to the licensing. And normally we're not the ones who say a serving establishment or a liquor store can only have hours from X to Y. That's either based on state statute or local ordinance. So I think Jeff's wise to point that out.
Who's sponsoring this article? Board of Selectmen?
The selectmen.
Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah. I'm being told that the, Mr. Costello used the Mashpee bylaw as a base for this language.
I missed the first part of your introduction, Gabby. When is, you know, when is the Board of Selectmen looking, or the town manager looking for these recommendations on these matters? In other words, do we need to actually provide that tonight?
Yeah, they were looking to receive comments from the board tonight, yeah.
Well, I think,
Oh, well, I think we can give them some comments. I'm not sure we give them a recommendation.
I agree, Jeff.
I agree as well.
We need some clarification on zoning versus licensing, and then the changes made.
Okay.
I mean, shame on me, but honestly, I don't even know whether there is a local licensing element here.
I don't.
I think it's
Well,
a good question.
usually when we do, you know, a zoning proposal like this, you know, we do the zoning bylaw first, and that is approved, and then some sort of regulation is drafted. We did that with stormwater. We approved the stormwater bylaw, and then the local regulations were adopted so that the bylaw could be applied. So my guess is that would be the same process.
So then the article that's number 1 on this thing is really the one that falls within sounds like the zoning one at the top.
Well,
And then the article below it, which is the one that Jeff has questions and concerns over, which I agree, and as do I, that's the selectmen's.
but they are zoning articles, they are going into the zoning bylaw, so even though they're sponsored by the selectmen, we would have to hold public hearings for them because they're zoning matters.
Has Barney looked at this at all, do you know?
I don't know.
I think we've got a lot of questions.
Barney's here.
Here, it just appears out of nowhere.
This is becoming a habit, I think. To answer, I think that was Jeff's question. No, I have not seen this at all.
Okay.
The only thing I know about it is listening to you at the last planning board meeting, and then just reading what I've read in the Foxborough Reporter.
All right, I will get the language to you, Barney.
I can't wait. Thank you.
Okay.
Paige just weighed in here. The Board of Selectmen will adopt the licensing after the zoning. But the zoning seems to have a lot of licensing language in it, which is, I think, our concern.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Barney was looking at that.
Well, concern, but certainly confusion.
Yeah.
Right.
And obviously Paige misses us a whole heck of a lot because she must be listening in.
She is. So we can give feedback as to what our recommendations for the zoning is. Whether it's planning board or no, or, but that's as far as we're recommending it, unless they clarify, right?
I'm not recommending
I'd like to see
anything.
more clarification. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, as you are aware, because I watched a couple of your meetings, there was a bylaw drafted just initially by Pat Costello. And so since Monday, I've had a chance to work on it. I met with Leah somewhere here, over there, and actually Jeff was able to stop by, and then Barney, so we had a little powwow that just was impromptu, really helpful. I revised the bylaw, and Barney has as well. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it's, I think a little bit closer to what we wanted. The main thing I would ask of you guys is, and I emailed you about this, is that on page 4 is a list of the special permit requirements. And then after I had already finalized this and sent it out, I noticed that Littleton, the town of Littleton, had some other lists. So on this separate handout, I actually could make it easier. On the second handout about marijuana, I have all the same conditions that are on page 4. And then below that are some of the Littleton conditions, not conditions, requirements. And you'll see there are a lot more. So I just thought, in addition to whatever discussion we have, that we could maybe go through those, and then Barney thought it most appropriate that this board sort of decide on that, since you own the special permit. So it'd be like, what do you want to see in the special permit? So that might be a good thing for you to give input on.
What happened to the section that, that said, no, yes, special permit?
Right, so we took that out because we came up with a different approach, and this is by no means anywhere done, and in fact, it's not even right, because the red is a red herring. It doesn't, that just shows R15, which is, I think, confusing to everybody. Sorry, let me get near the microphone. So, but these yellow colors here, the yellow here and here are right now what we're talking about for areas. So then we don't have to do it in the use table, because it was really hard to explain, like, it could be in the general industrial, but not within 5,280 feet of the town common as measured at the crow flies. Like, it was cumbersome to try to explain it. So all of a sudden we were like, what about an overlay map? And then that way we could just make a picture.
So is the yellow by your right hand Route 1?
The yellow by my right hand, yes.
Yes.
All of S1, all of up here by Route 1, yes.
And what's down there? Where's
And
that?
none of this.
Yeah.
And then this yellow.
What is that?
It's like Springbrook area, Belcher.
Okay.
Industrial.
And then which one is this? This is, I think, Forbes Crossing area.
Gotcha.
It's the
So, those areas. So those are the current ones we're discussing. Again, no one's really made any decisions, but, so that's why we got rid of the SP and all that, because it was just too confusing to try to explain where it could be allowed and where it couldn't be allowed, because it wasn't as neat and clean as to allow it in like all of general industrial, because some of those areas are close to uptown, and we didn't want that. We definitely don't want anything uptown on that, so.
And so based on that overlay map, is everything by right? Is everything special permit?
No, everything's special permit.
Okay, that's what I thought.
No by right.
Yeah, okay.
And then, like, I would recommend, this is a little further in advance, and we kind of need to regroup. The selectmen are going to be talking about this Tuesday, I believe, right, Leah? Yeah. And so if any of you all want to attend that meeting virtually or whatnot, we could post it if you think there's any benefit to that. But that said, and maybe we should do that just in case, but I forgot, oh, we were talking, the other thing that Littleton did was kind of cool is, we believe we only have one retail establishment that will be allowed and one cultivation, although that we need to confirm that, but that's what I'm being told has been discovered. In that case, we might want to do something like an RFI, where you put it out to bid and say, kind of send us your highest and best offers.
So and that's based on the
But that would
fact
be-
that we have X amount of alcohol serving establishments or
I think it's full.
liquor stores?
We think it's all alcohol
All
license, yeah.
yeah.
We have to that's one of the things we have to check.
So that would limit us to the one right now. If it increased at some point in the future, they might be allowed a second.
Yeah, and I believe town meeting can vote to increase it, but for right now, we're just assuming the one is accurate, and we're gonna double check that. I think we're all comfortable with one for right now, and just kind of see how it goes, and then decide from there. So that's kind of where we are. So I don't know if you all, how you want to go through this. Has anybody had a chance to review this? No.
You're talking about the Littleton list?
Yeah, the Littleton list,
Yeah.
or the general one, in general.
Before we get too deeply into discussion on this, I would like to disclose that if this does move forward, I would be an interested party in attaining a cultivation license. Just, I want to have that out there for the record. And I do feel that I can be impartial in the voting.
So, you know, I don't know if we want to go through this section by section right now, unless you think that that's what we really need to do, Paige, to be.
Well, I want to get it to a point where you feel comfortable for the selectmen to discuss it Tuesday night and maybe, vote to put it on the warrant. So I think we need to have enough of a discussion
Right.
that this board feels at least 75% good about. We might need to tweak it a bit, but, we want Barney to come back and really look at it, and town
Maybe-
council one more time.
Maybe for this, purposes of this discussion, it would be more helpful if you could just quickly go through and
Sure.
point out any departures from the original.
Well, that'll be hard to do,
Would
but
it?
I'll try. I can go through how about I just go through the bylaw and then we can talk.
That's what I meant.
You
yeah.
probably know the original better than I do, so you let me know.
All right.
But so obviously the first one is basically to rescind the rescission. That would be the first step, that number 1 there, article. If that fails, then this is all moot. So it would not move forward if that failed to move forward. Assuming that the rescission, the not allowing marijuana is rescinded, then we would go on to this next article, which would be to allow marijuana establishments and retailers. So the first section, nobody's really had any problems with, it's just a purpose. And then the definitions, this is a change from the first version, is that rather than having the definitions in the definitions section, Barney recommended we move them to this section just because they only pertain to this section. So it's kind of more helpful to have them. It's not like you talk about anything else, anywhere else. So it's kind of helpful to have it all in that section. So we added a local licensing authority. And that's one change as well. Jeff, you had mentioned that you might want consideration to be given to not necessarily having the selectmen automatically be the local licensing authority to deal with the host community agreement and whatnot. They thought maybe an ad hoc committee. So we did check with town council on that. He just wrote a long letter about that. Seems like it can be done.
Right.
I didn't have a chance. I was reading it on my phone, so I didn't read it. But it seemed like something could be done. So that might be something that the selectmen will talk about. And Jeff, I don't know if you're going to be around on Tuesday to maybe, it might be good for these two boards, if possible, to kind of put their heads together, since our time is short on this. But, so that's one. And we defined host community agreement, that's a new one, just so that folks know what it is. Marijuana, that's not new, and the other 3 were already in there, they're just now in this section. Applicability, we really just changed format on this, to make it match our bylaw. Eligible locations did change, because now we actually reference the map. And this is something Barney maybe hasn't reviewed, so I do want, I kind of whipped this up, so hopefully it passes muster, but I think it will. And then now we get into the 7.65, and this is really you know, some of the meat of it. So we, it can't be located within 500 feet of park, school, whatever. That's all state law. We did have it at 1,000, but then when we looked at it, we're not sure we're allowed to do that. So Barney had it at 1,000. And let's see.
But if Attorney Costello or someone from the state says we could, would that be the preference, to limit it to a higher number rather than 500?
I don't know, that's what, I think Barney had put it, so I don't know, is that it's really more your preference or the town's preference? I wonder if he chose that, because
And
maybe.
I don't know, well, I don't know how the selectmen feel about it as well, so.
We haven't spoken about that yet.
Right.
I just want to see if the I'm wondering if the medical marijuana might say that. I won't look now, because it'll take too much time, but I'm just wondering if that's where he got the 1,000 from.
Okay.
Gabby's gonna look. So it can't be in a building containing residential units, blah, blah, blah. But it has to be in a building. It can't be, you know, a pop-up. The language in number 4, we were questioning, you know, the size there, but will say that is taken also from our medical marijuana. No, so that number 4 already exists in medical marijuana, where it says you can't have a gross floor area of less than 25 feet or greater than 20,000. That's a retailer. We don't anticipate 20,000, but I don't know. We added in the marijuana retail facility shall have restrooms, and that was based on meeting that staff had. Is that what it says,
Yeah,
1,000?
1,000,
So
yes.
that's where Barney got the 1,000, trying to be consistent. So
Okay.
we'll verify that we can't do that, but so the restrooms, so that was something that Brookline, we did, well, not we, but some people from the town, the town manager, police chief, all met with the Brookline Police Department, because they were one of the first to open recreational marijuana, and got a lot of great tips. And so one of the things, which I actually think will be not really as important now, but back in the day, when there were lines waiting to get into the marijuana stores, people would come from far and need a restroom, and they couldn't use a restroom, so that was becoming a nuisance, especially in Brookline, where they don't have as much space. But so we did just add in there that it has restaurants available to customers, so then that way, I don't know, so people won't be using the bushes, I guess. Hours of operation has changed. If you recall, there was a strict time in the first draft. We made that so it's set by a host community agreement. That's usually something that, you know, is negotiated. And in fact, the police chief in our meeting on Monday, Kevin, was that Monday or Tuesday? Monday.
When we met?
Yeah, he was saying, like, for example, if a retailer opened at the stadium, just saying that, like, in Patriot Place, like, he wouldn't want them to close at 8 p.m. when every other store was open, or every other thing was open till 10. So he's kind of saying, you know, you don't necessarily want to have like a blanket thing. There might be case by case, you know, where it makes more sense to have them open later.
Well, I certainly do like the idea of specifically linking with language the HCA to the special permit.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
And one of the things we discussed with Chief Grace also was just a question about how alcohol establishments, how late they're staying open. He said they often have hours till 10, but often close earlier than that if they're not seeing traffic, but they'd be allowed to open till 10, that's what I'm saying.
So I think it'd be case by, you know, different, you know, depending on the circumstance. The host community agreement would do it, and or you guys could if that wasn't done. So you can't smoke on the property. Signage has to be compliant with town of Foxborough sign by law, and you can't have like big pot leaves and neon, you know, stuff on there. It has to be very discreet. And then that they must provide Foxborough Police Department, Building Commissioner, and Planning Board names, phone numbers, email of all management staff and key holders. So that's kind of standard stuff. And then this 766 is the special permit requirements. So this is kind of what you would be asking for, and this is what the extra handout is about. And so, just looking at that, you know, obviously, some of this is no-brainer. Name, address of the owner, evidence of the applicant's right to occupy the site, either through a deed or a lease, or a letter of intent, something like that. You have to have a statement and an oath about shareholders, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of standard stuff. Certified list of all parties in interest. Let's see, proposed minimum security measures for the marijuana establishment, including lighting, fencing, alarms to ensure safety. Copies of all licenses that have been issued to the applicant by the Cannabis Control Commission. I'm not sure they'd have them yet, but maybe, you know, if they were coming back or something. And then for cultivation and growth facilities, and I know Jeff, you had a little concern about this, proposed odor mitigation plan, indicating locations of odor mitigation equipment, it should be state-of-the-art. So like Jeff was saying, like, what is state-of-the-art? And then I think if you go, let me see, if you go on page 2 of the extra handout with the Littleton thing, I liked what they had under number 5 there for, instead of this maybe, for cultivators, basically says they have to do energy use reduction and opportunities for renewable energy and strategies to reduce electric demand and engage. So I thought that was a.
At least those are objective standards.
Yeah, yeah. So, although those don't necessarily, we might still want to keep that unambiguous, or that ambiguous language in there, because it can work. Like, we use that type of language for.
I think I complained about it then, too.
You did. But maybe with this and that, it would be like a little extra, because I do think we want to make sure because sometimes they could come and say, well, these more efficient ones are noisier. So then we have to balance the noise versus the efficiency.
So how's that different than, language we use with like engineers, for example, for best practices? And it doesn't say it has to be the most modern, latest, up-to-date thing, but they have to be able to prove that the quality of how they do it, how they design it, and how it's installed, works correctly. So I'm not saying that that language is right, but I'm just saying.
No, I like the term, I'm writing that down because I like the term best practices. That's a good, I think we found a way to add that in there. And maybe, I'm trying to think if, for Doug King's project, I'm trying to remember, that's, I think, one of the ones we used it on.
It was over here, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, we looked it up.
oh, you did? And did
Yes.
it say state-of-the-art, or did it?
Unfortunately,
It didn't
it
say
did.
best. Darn. Well, maybe we could come up with something a little better than that, but I think the intent is there, and we all kind of know what it is.
Could we require proof of insurance coverage? Is that within our purview?
I think we could. I mean, the thing of it is I don't know if they would have insurance coverage at the time of application. It might be that that's more of a condition. I mean, obviously they're going to need, so like, would.
It would,
You
yeah.
have to be a licensing condition.
It
Yeah,
could be a
that'd
licensing condition.
So I think that goes without saying, but I think this is more like application
Okay.
stuff. So I don't think, you tell me, would they have insurance if they like just had a purchase and sale on the property and nothing else? They wouldn't. Yeah.
No.
So that would be something we would do at the time of review. And-
Okay,
and
I just want to make sure we
do
capture that.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's in the original draft. So then let's go through the Littleton stuff and just see if any of these jump out. Number 1 kind of confused me only because
Right.
I defer to Jeff on this one because he's the expert right now. I've not, like I told everybody, once Foxborough, like, banned marijuana, I stopped reading every planning document on the marijuana. So now, and then I've been out for 7 weeks and I can't read very well anyway due to the brain stuff. So I haven't been able to read all the state marijuana requirements. So I'm like, would they have a host committee agreement when they were filing with us? I
Well,
don't know.
even number 2 here, it talks, it gets to that same sequencing issue.
Yeah.
But certainly, number 1 presupposes that the first order of business would be to negotiate the HCA. Nothing happens before that. Certainly, nothing can happen before that. The license cannot be issued until that's completed. But I'm not sure if that's the best sequencing, but it certainly forces an order
Yeah.
of, process.
That might be a good
and
way,
how
because
it
now
happens.
I stand corrected, because I just looked at the one from Maynard, that list that we looked at, which is kind of long, but that does have the marijuana, has the host community agreement
As first.
finished
Yeah.
before, and only then can they go to the Board of Selectmen. So that might be wise. That might be the way to go, is like negotiate all that and then come to us. But I don't know, we might have to think about
Right,
that.
no, yeah.
Or not the selectmen, whoever is doing it. Sorry, I
No,
said
but I agree, the
selectmen,
host
but.
agreement should be in place. It's only fair to the community.
What?
The host agreement should be in place before anything moves forward.
Right. So do we want to put 1 in there?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
That's the only thing that would be fair to the town.
Yeah, and I think 2 as well, just because we'd like to know the status of whatever they're doing. I don't think there's any harm in 2, that's just.
And so where would this be going under 766?
Yeah, this would be
Okay.
somehow incorporated. I have to meld it with the existing ones, some of them are gonna be overlapping, so if that's the case, I'll have to meld them, otherwise I'll just add it in. Then 3, a list of waivers, the applicant seeks to obtain from the Cannabis Control Commission. So, yeah,
I think
we-
that's interesting. I had never seen anything about
Yeah, well, and I
the
think we
ability
definitely
to
wanna know
apply
that,
for
right?
waivers, yes.
Copies of all policies and procedures approved by the Cannabis Control Commission, including operating safety procedures, so no harm in that, right? I mean, I don't know if we're
There
gonna-
may be some redundancy there
Yeah.
within our existing draft text, but we can,
yeah, we can
check
finesse
on
that, yep. And then, for the cultivation, I think we do want to add that in about the sort of energy efficiencies. I think that's smart to put that in there. And then the quantity and source or sources of all marijuana products that will be sold. That seems to make sense. I mean, I don't know if they know, but they could certainly have a goal. Jeff, what's your face about?
I'm just saying, I think that, again, I do think that that is, and, you know, Kev, obviously, when we had spoken a couple of weeks ago, or even previously, you know, I still didn't exactly understand, you know, what was part of licensing, what wasn't part
Right.
of licensing, et cetera.
Right.
That certainly is gonna be, but it's not gonna be introduced until a later step. So it could be, as you said, conditioned, you know, as a condition going forward.
Right.
But I'm thinking that if we follow what would appear to be this sequence, it probably would not be available information at that time. I mean, it might be generalized.
Right, well, I think they must, I mean, probably like a lot of uses, I'm imagining the Cannabis Control Commission and the host community, you know, would be like, so how much do you think you're gonna do? You know, what is the, you know, so they probably are gonna have some sort of goal, so.
Also,
that could
this
be our
is confusing because they're using marijuana establishment in a different way than we are. To us, a marijuana establishment is a grow facility, and a marijuana retailer is a retailer.
True. Okay, so let me, yeah.
So,
And I do think the commission uses some different terminology.
so we should, regardless whatever we do, we need to either
Yeah.
be consistent
Yeah.
or segregated in some other fashion, because we're looking at two different uses here.
Okay,
Now, you know, in some places, in some states, they allow the retail right on the site of the grow establishment.
That's
they
a
don't allow
possibility,
that.
that's a
They do not.
I think they
possibility
allow
here.
that here too.
You
Yeah.
know, so, you know, I just.
Yeah.
Well, isn't Sharon on two different
Buildings behind
sites
the
or
other,
something? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they're separated,
Yeah.
slightly.
Slightly.
But I'm just pointing that out. I mean, I don't, because they're saying, where are you getting the weed from? And we're
Right.
growing it right here. It's like,
Right.
you know, that's all I'm, you know.
Well, and I think what you have to remember too is these requirements, I mean, are kind of also really just application submittal things. So in a way, you know, in the narrative, you're gonna want them to say, oh, our marijuana is gonna be trucked in from Northampton, and then be like, oh, how many trucks are that gonna be? Or is it, oh, it's gonna be grown on site? Oh, okay, then you know it's not gonna be, and so it kind of gives you information to make your decision. It's not necessarily binding or part of the major application, it's more just part of the narrative, I think, where it will help you
And I don't think
understand the
that's what
scale.
you're gonna hear either. I think they're gonna name the specific, manufacturer isn't the right word, but the specific company that's packaging and providing the different types of marijuana for either recreational or medical use. And that's what they'll tell you. They're not gonna say, we're getting a truck in from Northampton,
Right, right.
and we're gonna do it ourselves.
But if you know it's coming from off-site, you'd be like, well, when's it coming, how's it coming, what's the
Right,
truck route, you know,
right.
then that suddenly, that changes it if, then it's not off-site. So it basically gives you more information with which to consider impacts, and I think it would be helpful. Let me just make a note of that. Okay, then the 7 is kind of the same.
It is the
Quantity,
same,
blah, blah,
yeah.
blah. A written statement that confirming that no marijuana or marijuana products will be smoked, burned, consumed on the premises. So I think we might want to use that one rather than maybe what we have. Or maybe we didn't even have it there. We have it somewhere else. I
We
can't
would
remember.
have the
You do
word
have it
vape,
in there.
too.
We had it somewhere else. I
And,
remember seeing
and I
it.
did want to just mention for you guys, as a little bit of a caveat, there are provisions for those types of establishments, specific licenses that are not available now, but expect to be available, you know, in a pilot program soon.
What specific?
For consumption.
Social consumption,
On-site
on-site.
consumption, right. So,
You might-
under those circumstances, this would probably just, you'd have to have that specific kind of license. It would not be the type of license that we would be considering as part of what would appear to be the first round anyway.
It's gonna be interesting to see how they do that, because you can have a beer and be fine, but they're, you know, how are they gonna determine how much marijuana somebody can consume before they're impaired behind the wheel?
There are limits for those in that, under that pilot license, which is available. You can review the text, and there are specific limits. Now, what do they mean? I don't know. But there is specific text about that.
Page under 8 there,
Yep.
you might just add the word vape,
Word what?
vape,
Vape, okay.
or vaping, or whatever, because it's different than smoking.
Look at you being all hip and stuff.
Okay. So I guess the bottom line is when I look this, I actually prefer Littleton's language, and I think I might want to just take out the good stuff of our prior draft and like incorporate it in here. I think a lot of this stuff, like even as we keep, I was just reading ahead, you know, the name and owner, that's fine, the articles, corporation, licenses, but like, I liked 13. I like their 13 better than what we had, so I feel like that was a good one to put in there with all the site plan requirement, you know, it's basically saying further delineate various areas, indoors and outdoors, blah, blah, blah. So I feel like that's good. So I think I would recommend we kind of take this one and then make sure we get all the good stuff from the prior list.
Yeah, I would just say be judicious, you
Yeah.
know, what you think is appropriate.
So that's 766, yep, 766, back to the other one. And then there's some mandatory findings that you would have to make in addition to the traditional special permit findings. You would have this 1, 2, 3, and 4. That would be required in order to grant a special permit in addition to the standard ones. Then there'd be some annual reporting. Little bit to us, but I like 1 and 2 because it basically puts it with the police department and the building department for some of that, you know, they have to keep them up to date every year and have a meeting every year. And then the transfer of the permit, let me see where this went.
Did you have a chance to like review that first, right under the 769, that, remember we talked about that first sentence there about the special permit running concurrent with the property interest as opposed to the license? Or have we not checked that out yet?
We didn't,
Okay.
yeah.
I had just
I kind of thought we
suggested,
addressed it in the meeting, but maybe not.
I had just suggested that I'm not sure whether it would be better or maybe not. Because this, you know, has it running concurrent with either the ownership or lease and interest in the property
Yeah.
as opposed to the license, which, you know, could be revoked or not renewed, which is an annual renewal prior to the expiration of any property interest.
But I
So
think
it's just
like-
something to think
If they
about.
lost their lease and they had another location that met all the criteria, they could.
Well, there are
Theoretically.
provisions for that as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
for transferring to a different
But to
location.
Jeff's point, I was sort of playing devil's advocate on that, only because I think that the state's hand in marijuana permitting, like if they lose their license, they're not running a marijuana operation, regardless of whether the planning board,
Yeah.
whatever, what we say.
Yes.
So I was making the unlikely example, which I don't even think this could ever really happen, but imagine something lapsed and they couldn't sell for a month. Again, I can't imagine that would, you know, I don't know that we'd want a knee jerk, be like, oh, your permit's rescinded, and then they could go back and, you know, reinstate it somehow. So I guess we'll look into that, but I
Yeah.
don't really, I feel like the state is so heavy in managing this that, you know, if you're not allowed to sell by the state, you're not a marijuana establishment or retailer, period. You're done. So, yeah, let me go back to that. I'll check on that. Removal bond, Barney added this. I think this is a new since last night.
Yeah, quick question.
Yep.
Why would a documentation of a bond posted with the Cannabis Control Commission satisfy this requirement?
That is a requirement of the license.
Yeah,
and-
but wouldn't we want another bond? Because is the Cannabis Control Commission going to give us the money from their bond if we have to remove the
Well,
Well, let's just
At-
remove it.
Right, well, I think the primary function of the bond posted to the commission is for the destruction of any inventory.
Okay.
I think that's the idea. If something happened to your license, they would want to destroy your inventory. Now, I'm not sure exactly, you know, what rights that gives the business owner, or if any, but there were also some language that was talking about the property itself. And honestly, it didn't make sense to me, because I'm not sure what the town would want to be doing in terms of a building. You know, we certainly wouldn't want to raise the building.
No, well, that's
you
what I was
know.
just looking at this, reading
Right.
it closely, and I'm like, town must remove the facility.
Well, that language was in the
Oh,
original
it
draft
was?
bylaw.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought this was new.
Gabby and I kind of talked about that.
Yeah, so I don't know about that, but we certainly don't want to remove the facility.
Right.
I think, what if we put something like, the documentation of a bond posted with Cannabis Control Commission may satisfy this requirement, subject to planning board conditions or something like that. So it basically gives
Leaves
you
it
the
open.
discretion case by
Leaves it
case
open,
as we learn more.
Yeah, it leaves it open.
Okay, and then abandonment discontinued use, basically if they don't do it within a year. This might be new. I think this got added, but I didn't know the other one
Actually,
very
the
well.
number one was in the draft bylaw, that if they don't exercise the special permit within a year, actually, I thought it might even have been 6 months, I'm not sure. But there was a provision, if you don't exercise it, we're pulling it.
Right, okay. So going back to the one before about the bond, now that I look at number 2, under 7611, I feel like that's what would have to be done. That's the removal is, shall be required to remove all material, plants, equipment, and other paraphernalia from the permitted premises. I feel like that's what we'd be looking for, not the building.
Right.
I mean, there's no, so we.
I agree.
Maybe this could we could make some reference to that in 7610 that basically says consistent with like 7611-2.
I'm actually going to look into that a little bit, because again, why would we want the town to
Get involved.
require that prior to surrendering the state license, which it says in number 1?
Right, right.
I just don't, I'll look into
Maybe,
it.
yeah, look into to see if we can just rely on the state to do this, because
Yeah,
like you said,
exactly.
if the state rescinds or they remove it, then that's it, but we do want to make sure they clean up anything.
Yep.
So. Limitations, number shall not exceed the number that are allowed by state law, unless there's a town ballot. This is, right now, we made the decision the other day to prohibit delivery. And we also, so this is where it talks about consumption, on number 2, under 7612, that all marijuana retailers and establishments are prohibited from delivering cannabis or marijuana products to consumers and from offering cannabis or marijuana products for consumption on the premises. So that's that prohibition. And then we did say, though, the curbside may be authorized as part of the special permit process.
So how does that jive with the fact that the state is allowing delivery? Let's say there's a delivery service in Brockton, and a medical patient calls from Foxborough. How do you deal
So
with that?
interesting thing was, and there are certainly
There are, I
licenses
know.
for delivery
Yes,
services.
yes.
But I was even thinking about under 2, this hasn't gone through council yet, have it? No. I think the key there is we may end up with a medical application.
Right.
And under those circumstances, there may be some,
Well, we have a medical marijuana bylaw, so we actually probably will need to clelean that up. Maybe that.
well, I'm thinking specifically in terms of delivery, it may be something that the state,
To go, they don't have a,
that service would be required.
Right.
In
Yeah.
some way. I'm just saying, we should check.
Okay. And then citing, let's see what this says. It talks about the map, that's a map, that's it. And then the last part is adopting the map itself. So that's basically where we are.
I think it's made good progress.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So what do you think?
It's a lot better than it was.
It's a lot better.
All right, so, like I said, Tuesday night, if you guys have any comments in the interim, let me know. I'm gonna try to wrap it up. And then, for the next round, we gotta get it to council. Barney's back Monday, it'll go through another review, but in the meantime, the selectmen will be talking about it Tuesday night. Can we make a note to post to the planning board just in case?
We will have town council on, Jeff, so if there's anything that we want to talk about, like, that comes up, I did ask Pat to attend on Tuesday, so it could be good.
It could be. I mean, it's tough for anyone, him included, to sit, in real time and try to
He
make
seems to
that.
know it pretty well, though. He does seem to
He's done
kind of
a
know
couple
it.
towns, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
I tried to get him to come tonight. Unfortunately, he was already booked, so it was a last minute request, but we're comfortable continuing on right now?
Yes.
I think so.
All right. All right, so moving on to item 8, which is the annual town meeting warrant. We're actually right on time. So we're going to start with the marijuana article.
and then we're going to move to the sign bylaw article. And then I just added something to cover us in case we needed to talk about any article, any other articles, although I don't have any specifically that I need to talk about, or procedural questions as far as like what the timeline looks like. Seth, I know you would mention that, so then we'll go into that item last. So let's start with the marijuana article. And just to set the stage on this, it is still in draft. So, you know, we talked as a board about putting it forward. We had a starting place, which that's all that it was. The draft has gone to a number of different internal departments, from town manager's office, planning department, public safety. The planning board then met on Thursday, which Christina sent the link out. I think everyone got a chance on our board to watch that, and that was televised. So I think that discussion was helpful, and we have a couple members of the planning board here this evening. And now the bylaw is with us to further review. I don't think, you know, we don't have to approve it tonight as it is. We can take more feedback, and we have some time to further massage it. But just to hit the highlights, and anyone chime in after if I've forgotten anything. And we have Mr. Costello here as well, town council, just to, you know, kind of walk us through if there's any technical questions or anything. From the first draft that we saw, some of the bigger changes have been creating an overlay district. So the first draft had a table in it, and, you know, was it allowed by special permit in S1 or, you know, general business? Where was it allowed? Where was it allowed? And it was too complicated to do in a table, so we ended up creating an overlay district, which, if you look at the map, and I don't see it attached in here. I thought it was in here. And it must have disappeared. Because I thought I saw it, but it's gone.
Yeah, I don't see
May
it.
have been in our emails. So I remember seeing it. Too.
Yeah, okay. So there's an overlay map, which planning board has seen. It sounds like all you guys have seen it. But basically the intent of the overlay map is to keep it out of our uptown, you know, kind of that section, any residential section, and keep it more towards like the limited industrial places and kind of the S1 and general industrial up along Route 1 and down along the bottom of the town. The second piece is we've removed a lot of the licensing pieces and just pointed to the host community agreement. So if you watched planning board, you know, some discussions came up about hours of operation and all that, and we ended up taking all that out and just would have to be pointed to the host community agreement, which would have to be one of the first things that was executed. Another bigger theme that came up is, you know, as far as the host community agreement, is the Board of Selectmen the right group to look at that? Or do we want to maybe have some type of special group that's maybe someone from planning board, someone from selectmen, and we haven't decided what the details look like. Maybe it's a citizen, maybe it's someone from AdCom, but a special group to look at that host community agreement for us to then approve it. I think that's all. There's a lot of other little tweaks in the language. Barney did look at it as well, to just look at it from his perspective. So there's many more tweaks. I feel like it's coming further along. But is there anything else, Pat or Bill, big theme that I'm forgetting?
So the one thing was that we've talked with, I actually had spoken with Frank Spillane, the town moderator on this, as well as the town council, and it made sense for us to take a look at maybe combining the two articles into one, because one actually removes the prohibition of that in the town, and having that combined with the article, the enabling act, if you will, of the zoning, does seem to fit together, because as was correctly pointed out, if you do take away the enabling or the prohibition, and then don't have an enabling piece of legislation that would allow that to be done in certain areas, it could potentially be done anywhere. So in other words, if somebody disagreed with the way the article was written, but yet the town voted to remove the prohibition, you'd have the ability to do it, but it could be done potentially anywhere.
Reorder them.
Yeah. Well, you could, I suppose you could do that
Yeah,
as
that was
well.
gonna be one of my questions. So what if we ever voted to rescind, right? I guess this could happen.
Yeah.
And then the second article somehow didn't pass. with
That's,
two-thirds
that
of
was
you-
what I just described.
Okay,
So
because
if you-
in
if you
ours,
had
it's still
that-
the opposite.
Yeah, so
draft.
you could do it the other way, I suppose, but it also could be done in one article. And I talked to town council about that
Okay.
today and with the town moderator to see if that was possible. And we both, collectively, I think that's a possibility.
So the one article would be Article 1 as it's written now, just as the first paragraph
Right,
of the
exactly.
article. Okay.
Exactly.
So these are still, although they're sponsored by the planning board, they are zoning articles requiring the 2/3 vote, requiring the public hearings, you know, and many more steps down the road for these. But I think that the draft bylaw has come a lot further in the last 2 weeks, really, than where we started out, because you have to start out somewhere.
Right.
And then everyone's got to kind of talk through it. So is there anything else, kind of big themes that I'm?
I don't think so. I agree with you 100%. This was, it had to start somewhere, and the process sort of took us to where we are today. And so that's actually a successful story in many ways, because we had several different iterations, a lot of people have had input into it, and ultimately, I think we'll end up with a bylaw that actually is a pretty good one.
Yeah, but we're not done, so that's what we're here
Right.
to do with this group tonight, is to look at that and to see if there's anything that we want to further tweak as this goes down the road.
Go ahead, you go first.
Oh, thanks, Doc. So just a quick comment and then a question. So the comment is, I'd be surprised if folks wanted a marijuana store at the old Foxfield Plaza there. That feels like a weird place for it. And then my question is around 7.6.3 applicability, which states, nothing in this bylaw shall be construed to supersede federal and state laws governing the sale and distribution of narcotic drugs. Marijuana is illegal at the federal level. Is that accurate?
Still is.
I'm going to let town council
If
respond.
I may, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I don't believe marijuana is classified as a narcotic drug under federal law. You're correct. It is not legalized under federal law, but I believe it's a Class D substance in a different classification than narcotics. That language is interesting. It's sort of a catch-all clause that many bylaws do have, solely to confirm the fact that this is a local legislative act, and it doesn't supersede any federal or state laws that govern the use, distribution of narcotics.
If we could confirm.
No, I think, Pat, I apologize. I think I might have to disagree with you. I think marijuana is classified as a Class 1.
The narcotic?
Schedule 1.
Doc, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is, federally.
All right, we'll look
We could
into
look
that.
that up
I'll
and I can
certainly
go back and
clarify.
confirm.
Yeah. What a lot of people might not realize is I'm also a pharmacist. So I'm pretty sure it's a Class 1, but I'll double check.
And just to go back to that piece of the zoning near Foxfield, just, I think the rationale behind that is some of the industrial park area in there, you may, after COVID, have some of those buildings down there towards, you know, the end that could be closing, that do we want to open this to possibly include that section?
Is that on the other side of Route 1?
No, so, like if you were go down past Jake and Joe's, like that area,
Yeah.
that area there.
There's some
Where you
office
mentioned
space there.
Foxfield.
Yeah,
Office
yeah.
space there.
Sorry, Bill?
There's office space there that's empty.
Yeah, still what I would consider residential around that area. Mansfield. Anyway.
Okay, anything else in the? before
Yeah,
we go to
I do
Doc?
have a question, and it's the next section up, 762. Why would there be another authorized designee on behalf of the board for its review? Why wouldn't we be the reviewing board?
I think that the spirit of that was in case we wanted to have a group that would review the host community agreement and then come to us with a recommendation as the ultimate local licensing authority.
So it'd be like a CIP committee recommending to the Board of Selectmen for final action. No different.
And I apologize, I don't read it that way. I read it that they're the ones that are going to approve the license. Am I reading that incorrectly?
Yeah, I thought they could give us a recommendation, but we had to ultimately approve it, Pat, unless that changed since the last we talked.
No, that's correct, Madam Chair. Whoever under the bylaw is authorized to execute the host community agreements has to have the legal authority to bind the town contractually. The host community agreements are, at essence, legal contracts, and it would have to be someone such as the Board of Selectmen or the town manager who have the authority to bind the town, who actually execute the agreement. What many communities do is they appoint a committee or delegate to other town officers or a board the initial task of vetting, reviewing potential applicants, and making recommendations to the ultimate executory authority relative to execution of the host community agreement. So that's something I just saw that language in the recent draft. We would want to tweak that a little bit more so than how
So that it would
presented
just
now.
say review, not execute, in 762,
Yeah.
section
Right.
1.
Yeah, I would like to see better language in there,
Okay,
then, yes.
agree. Any other questions, comments from the board? We do have some members of the planning board, not to put you guys on the spot. I didn't know if you had any questions, comments, anything you wanted to discuss. They did post it as a meeting. However, it doesn't look like you have a quorum to call a meeting to order or anything, but.
I think Kevin's on.
Oh, he is. Oh, I didn't know Kevin was on.
We do have Barney, Kevin, Lorraine, and Paige on.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't know you guys were on. Do you need or want to call a meeting to order on this? Probably.
It's just two members at this point.
Well, no,
right?
Kevin's here. Kevin's here. I didn't
Okay.
realize Kevin was on.
Okay.
My apologies, Kevin. We can't see or hear him yet. I don't know if.
Can you bring them up? They can put them on?
Madam Chair, if I may note, if we have a quorum of the planning board present, it would not be appropriate for them to deliberate here unless they do have a posted meeting scheduled for tonight.
They do have one posted, so I didn't know if they needed to call it to order. So Kevin, my
Excellent.
apologies.
There
I
we
did
go.
not realize you're on. If you guys need or want to call a meeting to order, if you're just listening this evening.
So I don't know who is here. I know Paige is here, and I know, but I don't know who else
So
is.
here in the room, you have Jeff and Ron.
So, I mean, if any of those individuals do want to make commentary, then I guess we probably would have to formally call the meeting to order.
We're looking at the gentleman in the room to see if anyone would like to.
Well, I do have a question.
Okay, yeah, I think we should, so we can bring
Fine.
these two up if you don't mind. It's two gentlemen
No,
up,
not at
so why
all.
don't you guys call your meeting to order, and then if you want to come join us at the table?
So as part of this selectmen's meeting, and because we posted this as a potential open meeting, I'll call the planning board meeting open for review of this article.
Come on up.
All right, can you hear everyone okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I can hear everyone fine.
Okay, and Paige is on as well, I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
So my only question, and since council is here, and this is gonna be, you know, we've already talked about this, and people are rolling their eyes, but this goes back to the issue, because and I would put this to council, please, it seemed to me quite explicit in the statute that ballot approval is necessary at some point before this goes, because we don't have an affirmative vote yet at the ballot for this. And so I just want to make sure, I mean, I'm skittish about that.
And Frank, you want to come up too, or are you good, you want to come up as well, or are you good back there? This whole question about, is just rescinding the former ballot sufficient, or do we need a ballot for this to move
So
forward?
the original vote was an opinion vote. It was not a
Non-binding.
binding vote.
That's fine, but my point is that it seemed to me quite clear in statute that an affirmative vote is needed at the ballot box at some point.
For certain things. And council, and Pat, could you address that, please?
Sure, thank you. I don't believe that a ballot vote is adopted to generally adopt a bylaw such as that presented here. You're absolutely correct. There are certain prohibitions or limitations that the town can impose by bylaw that do have to go to the ballot first before they can go to town meeting. And the recently revised draft bylaw does in fact have one of those agreements, and the language is a little different in there. It's section 7612.1, which provides that the number of marijuana retailers, it can only relate to retailers, not establishments, within the town shall not exceed the minimum number required under Chapter 94G, Section 3A22, to basically the number of package stores licenses issued in the town. In order for us to impose that limitation on the number of adult use marijuana facilities, we would need a ballot question approved by the voters. But short of that particular provision, I believe we can adopt the proposed bylaws as presented, which would, number one, eliminate the prohibitions that appear in two separate sections of the bylaws, and adopt this particular adult use bylaw by vote of town meeting. It would be a 2/3 vote of town meeting. That's all that's required.
Okay, just wanted to make sure,
Yeah.
Don't want to get ahead of
That's a
ourselves.
good point.
Yeah, and while we're on that, just for everyone's understanding and to be on the same page, that would give us one retail and one cultivation based on the number of alcohol establishments that we have in town. So that's what we would be looking at.
Get one of
If this
each.
were to move forward as far as numbers of establishments. So one and one.
Well, keep in mind, Madam Chair, that the language in the statute in Section 3A22 only allows the town to limit the number of retailers to that number two. I don't believe we can bar or prohibit various types of marijuana establishments, but I don't believe there's anything in the statute that would allow us to limit the number of establishments other than retailers.
Okay, so that's new.
That's interesting,
That's
yeah.
new information to me, Pat. What I had heard all along was one and one, and I think
That's all I heard
that's
too.
probably so we're limited in the number of retail, but not necessarily in the number of cultivation.
That's correct.
Or
We
process.
could limit
Or processing,
retailers
right.
Processing facilities,
maximum
yeah.
Right,
of two.
right.
Oh, you could do that, you could include that in the bylaw, I suppose, correct, Pat? If you wanted to limit it to no more than one?
I don't think so.
No, I think the licensing requirements, Bill, are such that we can limit the numbers of establishments by not executing or approving host community agreements for establishments. In order for any establishment to apply for a license for the Cannabis Control Commission, it would have to first execute a host community agreement with the town. And the town is not mandated or required to execute limitless host community agreements. We can exercise some level of discretion in that regard. We cannot unreasonably refuse to execute a host community agreement, but various reasons could arise, neighborhood conditions, number of facilities already operating in the town that in my mind would justify the select board or the executory authority, whoever's designated, to refuse to execute a host community agreement. That in and of itself is a limitation that lies with the town. But in terms of bylaws, we can only adopt bylaws limiting marijuana establishments and facilities to the extent that they're allowed in that section of Section 3 of Chapter 94G. And as I noted, the limitation that we have chosen to incorporate into the bylaw is one that would require prior ballot approval in order to implement. So
To go beyond one.
to go beyond, for retailers, to go beyond two, I think the number is.
Okay. And we had talked about, if we do have one, maybe it's a deadline or something to get the most competitive host community agreement that we could, that could be part of the process as
That was-
well.
That was part of the planning board discussion.
Yeah, they talked about that, yep.
I think Paige had said that. I thought it was 1-on-1 too.
Yeah, that's
That's the
what
way we understood it,
yeah, yeah.
when we heard that from,
Yeah.
I think it was from Brookline, we'd heard that.
Yeah.
It was the way it was presented to us.
So the overlay map, just since that came up tonight, does that lie with the planning board then to massage that as you guys see fit? Because,
Yeah.
like I said, I think it was a first pass at it. I don't think, at least speaking for myself, no one's tied or married to that. It was just really a starting point for what you guys feel.
And so, does everybody understand, the advantages of using that type of approach? And it specifically addresses what you were talking about, Seth, about within a zone, whether it would be, in this case, limited industrial or general, where there might be areas that you think, or the town thinks, we shouldn't go there. Maybe it's Foxfield Plaza, but that's only part of a broader zone. This way, you can be, if you're writing zoning, you're accepting the whole enchilada if it becomes part of, codified as part of the zoning tables, This way, you're able to be more selective.
And S1 was the only, what I'd call clean zone. The other ones up on Route 1, appeared, almost uptown, like, whether it's the old Schneider or kind of where, I'm gonna call it the new Winslow's, even though it's probably been there for 20 years, is, just, we felt like the overlay map, once we started to try to, exclude and include different areas, it just became a little too murky. So it's a starting point, for whatever you guys see fit. And it is by special permit as well. So there'd be that extra layer, if it goes down the road as well.
Another quick thought, to the planning board, and I'm going back a number of years. Am I mistaken when I sort of seem to remember at one point the town voted only to allow marijuana facilities on the Route 1 district?
That vote
No,
was
it's
for
not
medical use.
It was medical use, okay.
That's right.
All right, okay.
And by the way, there still could be a medical, application
Sure.
coming in. I wouldn't anticipate it, but who knows,
Okay. And I did do a little research on my phone. It's remarkable what you can do on that thing.
It's like a computer.
It's almost
Literally.
like a computer. Yeah, marijuana is Schedule 1 under the DEA.
Okay.
Okay.
There are a couple of pharmaceuticals for cancer treatment that are Class 3 and Class 4, but marijuana.
Okay.
And I did get a.
So we'll
test
definitely
from
have to look at that piece that you
Yeah.
brought up.
Well, again, not again, I think there are towns that have already looked at that piece. And went forward, obviously, anyway, and the state went forward allowing it.
That's an interesting point, Doc. That was one of the clauses that was added in the recent redraft of the document, and I believe it was lifted or from another bylaw that had been approved. So if that particular language had already been through the process and approved by the Attorney General's office, that raises an interesting question. We'll certainly look into that in more detail.
Now, the future of marijuana is on-site consumption, I guess. This is a big thing that, just so you know, we are not looking at on-site consumption. So that's where you would literally, go to an establishment and consume the marijuana on the premises, much like a bar with alcohol.
Cigar bars.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Hookah bar.
So
Hookah bars, yeah.
just to let everyone know, we did talk about that and we felt, baby steps. We're not looking to include that, so. Anything else from this board, your board, since we're all here?
No, I actually had the same concerns that Jeff did as far as the overlay districts seem to spread a little bit further than they should, and just protection of the
Yeah.
residents.
And we just happened to run into each other at town hall, and
Yes, we did.
And we kind of had a little quick ad hoc meeting, which I think really helped answer a lot of questions. Hear where each other's coming from, and kind of just bang out a lot of pieces of it. So, again, another step of the process. The next step would be for us to, I think, continue to finalize this. I think Paige still's looking at it. Barney, there may be some revisions that went in that maybe, Pat, you haven't even seen yet. So I think we do have to have, staff and council continue to review those.
Agreed.
And then would it go to planning maybe one more time? Or do you guys think I think we'd have to come to each of us one more time. Yeah, to
convene a
kind of,
public hearing?
yep.
I would think so.
But even to
I think so,
just
too.
say that you're good with it being final, before it goes to the public hearing.
Kev?
Yeah, I believe that it should come back to us one more time as well, and the selectman, Mr. Costello, should take a final review. Barney, if he has anything else he wants to add or delete based on conversation we had tonight in order to make it more sound.
So I think
That
the
would be
next
good.
step is council and staff do that. You guys, there's still a little bit of time before your next meeting, and then you guys will meet on a Thursday, and we'll meet again on a Tuesday. So if you guys have your final sign off, and then it comes to us to make sure that we're all good on that final language, I think both of us have to review it one more time before it goes to that public hearing and finalization. And we do have the calendar in here as far as the warrant, you know, the dates, everything's final, the date that we take our positions, the date that we sign the warrant, so that's in here, and we have the appropriate time to make those next steps work. All right.
Okay.
Anything else? We'll have you guys adjourn your meeting.
Meeting being completed with the selectmen, I recommend that we adjourn. Do I have a vote?
Well, that would be a second to that, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, second, sorry about that.
I guess he said.
And a roll call vote, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, aye.
Ron, aye.
Kevin, aye.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Probably should have.
Thank
stayed in
you.
session because he got billed.
Okay, so on our call with us, so just to clarify, after the last meeting, we went over the marijuana bylaw. You have a new draft in front of you. A few changes that I outlined in my email are just that we combined Article 1 and 2 into one, and that was at the request of the moderator, just so that you wouldn't want one to pass without the other, vice versa. We also had tightened up some language at the request of town council. And then the other one, the big one was just as you recall, we went through the planning board requirements. And so I did, after our last meeting, revise that to reflect our conversation. So I did put together a little PowerPoint. I was asked to do this just because, you know, we're taking this on the road. It's going to the selectmen Tuesday night. It has to go in front of the AdCom, and it just seemed to be helpful to provide some context. So if I may, go ahead and figure out how to do my slideshow, I will do that. So let's see, share screen. Oops, okay, back up. All right, so marijuana's in it. So this is a timeline, just to provide a little context. It was all the way back in 2008 that it was marijuana was decriminalized. In 2012, so now 10 years ago, the Mass voters voted to legalize medical marijuana. In 2016, it was legalized, recreational was done. And then in 2017, Foxborough banned recreational marijuana. And then in 2018, the first 2 marijuana stores opened in Massachusetts. So that's just sort of the history. So the question is, why are we doing this now? We did have a 2017 non-binding referendum, and that was really because at the time, I don't know if you all recall, the regulations from the Cannabis Control Commission weren't even finalized, and it was kind of like the towns didn't really know what was coming. There was fears about, you know, the public all thronging, like they did for the first couple ones. There were lines and there were some impacts. So the town of Foxborough went to ballot and went for a non-binding, and then went to town meeting, and it did get banned at that time. Since that time, we've seen this project, you know, this type of use pop up all around us, and we've seen minimal impacts. So we've learned that it's not as, you know, there was a lot of fears, and they haven't really necessarily been realized. And in fact, you know, for example, I think what really hit a lot of people was Sharon. They opened their dispensary on Route 1, and hardly anybody even noticed. There's really been nothing, but they've seen some financial benefits, and we'll get to that in the next slide. So that's sort of why you can see that Sharon opened a dispensary, a retail one in August of 2020. Plainville was February 21, and Mansfield was 2021. October 2021. And Mansfield is actually right in, I think it used to be the old Orange Leaf, and now it's called Relief. So it's right in there across from, you know, the L.O. Bean Plaza there, so Mansfield Crossing. So, you know, initially, everybody, you know, we all people have fears of marijuana, and rightfully so in some aspects. It's not something to be taken lightly, but we have seen that there really has not been an increase in crime. And there's been a study that showed there was a decrease in the odds of teen marijuana use, and then they've proven that the property values have not been affected negatively, or they've actually risen. So we've, a lot of the concerns that were initially approached, we've not seen realized here in Massachusetts. But before we jumped in too deep, there was an extensive vetting process been done. Town of Brookline was opened one of the first dispensaries, and they had a lot of impacts, and I was out during the time, but I know Leah Gibson and Bill Keegan, and others met, and the police chief, I believe, met with Brookline, one of their police, and they got a lot of great recommendations and had some really great advice. And actually, when the police chief first heard about this, he was a hard no, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's been comforted by some of the information out there, and we'll let him speak to that on his own. But we have been working with the police chief. We've been researching other communities, as evidence with town council being on that. We've been working closely with town council, selectmen and planning board. We're trying to work together on this. So we really are trying to incorporate feedback and develop something that will be good for the community. So another big reason, why are we doing this? Well, Massachusetts is reaping the benefits. It's been $122 million in tax revenue from the first fiscal years. This is fun, talks about the 20% tax, includes a local option for tax up to 3%. And as of December of last year, more revenue was made through marijuana sales than liquor sales for the first time. So we are seeing quite a dramatic increase. Why are we doing it now? Well, we also feel like at a certain point the market's going to get saturated. Where, we already have a bunch around us. So here's the financial benefits for the communities around us. Sharon's $325,000 last year on their thing. Plainville only opened for a couple months. They were at $35,000. Lakeville, I tried to look for communities that were smaller and not, like cities. Most of them are in bigger communities. Like I didn't count like a Hudson or a Marlboro or those type. But Lakeville was 191,000 plus, Rowley 129, Middleborough 159, and Millis 370,000. So, and these are small population communities, a lot of these. So they are reaping the benefits, and they are not seeing the impacts. So then the question is town's role. This is one of those instances where the state is has tight controls on what towns can and can't do. They kind of assume that the town's going to go ahead and ban everything, because most communities do, so they make it so that we can't put too many belts and suspenders on there. So we can, adopt our own licensing or approval process, but we can't conflict with the regulations of the state. We can't make it more difficult or unreasonable. Once we approve retail, we cannot prohibit delivery or transport through the locality, and I don't think we can prohibit it right now. Like if someone was crossing through from one town to another, you can't say, oh, you can't use Foxborough roads for that. And you can limit the number of marijuana establishments below 2, but based on our liquor license, our package store number, but we would have to do a ballot and a town meeting vote. So right now, so I'll get into that, hold on. So the concerns and considerations that we've been working with is there'd be no marijuana use in or around Uptown Foxborough. We looked at non-residential areas for obvious reasons. And then one of the things we have been looking at is, how can we make these buffers? But this is one of those instances where it's tough. We did ask Pat Costello if we could bump up the buffers, to say 1,000 feet or add more protected uses. But that's a dicey area, and it's quite limited in what we can do.
Just a question. I noticed you're bolding pre-existing. So what if we built another school? Not that I think we will.
Right.
Or a daycare.
Well, you couldn't kick out but the point is you just couldn't make the marijuana facility leave.
Okay,
You just
but
have to
if
be
like
aware
I
they're
put
there.
there's a school, somebody couldn't put a new marijuana thing.
Correct, it's
Okay,
only a new
thank
use.
you.
But
Okay.
once they're there,
You can't boot them. Okay.
Yeah. So the big news since the last meeting is that at first there was some question about whether the beer and wine package stores counted towards the number, and we've since confirmed with town council that they do. So Foxborough has 10 package stores. Thusly, with the 20% ratio, Foxborough would be allowed 2 marijuana retailers at a minimum unless there was a ballot vote, unless there was a town meeting vote, so not one. So that is different than what's been out there, and we want to be very upfront about that. That's sort of new news, so it would be 2. And the other thing is, in our original draft, we did prohibit delivery, and we've learned that while we can prohibit delivery for retailers in our town, once we allow a retailer in our town, we can't prohibit delivery from other towns. So we kind of took that out, because we're like, why would we penalize our retailers
Right.
when any other retailer? So those are 2 of the bigger changes that have come up. The other question is, we want to provide a little more insight into the process. I know Jeff will love to see this, kind of like how.
Well, personally, I think this is the most important part.
Yeah, so it's, the applicant starts out, well, so first of all, this doesn't talk about, prior to this, what we anticipate happening is the town would control this by putting out an RFP, seeking the highest and best use at the time, the location. So that way, particularly with 1, but I think we'd still want to do it with the 2, where the town kind of gets to decide and evaluate where these will be located and how it will go. So that's sort of first, and then once we get into, okay, there's an applicant coming up, they would meet with the town administration, then they'd have to go through the whole marijuana host community agreement and present at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And then the selectmen can decide if they want to begin negotiating. We do have in the language that the selectmen could, appoint another committee if they wanted to have an ad hoc committee to represent them on that, although it has to be the BOS that that signs the agent. They're the only ones that can do that.
And not the town manager?
Or the town manager, right. And we can ask Pat on that.
I just think that needs to be specified
All right,
as
we'll get
well.
to that one. And then they have to have a community outreach meeting, and it has to be within 6 months of filing application with the Cannabis Control Commission. Then they'd apply for a provisional license. While they wait for it, that would probably be the time they'd start getting their local permits, and that would, they come to the planning board. CCC will check on the compliance with local bylaws. We have 60 days to respond. CCC will grant the provisional license, and then after all local permits have been granted, then the applicant can apply for the final license, and then finally that would be issued. So this isn't written anywhere, but this is just sort of, I've been asked to sort of see how this would go. So this is what we envision to be happening. So this is the highlights. We wanted to make sure we're clear. So there would be a number allowed of 2. In the bylaw right now, it would be limited to 2. So that number, we could limit it in the bylaw. If we went below 2, we'd have to do the ballot and the town meeting vote.
Just to clarify, in terms of the ratio to liquor retailers, how about if the state relaxes that, or is that currently when we adopt this bylaw, or will that grow in the future as the state becomes more generous?
I would have to ask town council on that. So you're asking all the questions. I don't know, Pat, are you on? Do we want to take these as we're going on? Let me see if he's permitted to speak. There he is. Ask to unmute. Here he comes.
Good evening.
May I move these?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yes, you can. Especially now that I have it up. So Jeff, do you want to pose, you had 2 questions. Pat's on you can't see him, but he's here. Hi, Pat, can we hear you?
Good evening. Yes, I can hear and see you. Yes.
I'm sorry, did you hear that last question that I had posed regarding the ratio of prospective licenses versus liquor retail licenses that the town holds through the ABCC?
I did indeed, and that would be a sliding scale analysis.
Yep.
If the number of liquor licenses increases, the number of minimum establishments should be required to allow in town would increase as well by the 20%.
Yep, got it, thank you.
Sure.
And then you had one other one. What was the last one that you had? I've already forgotten it. It was just, hold on, let me go back to slide to see if we remember what it was. Oh, no.
Town manager?
Town manager, yes, good, Tom.
So, actually, this came up,
Firing on all cylinders.
Pat, because when you were on remotely at the last select board meeting, there seemed to be some ambiguity from you at that time whether this license would be executed by the Board of Selectmen or the town manager. And I just think that when we're at town meeting, that needs to be specific.
Absolutely. It could be either. It's a community preference type thing and determined by the charter bylaws of the community. The official who executes the host community agreement would have to have legal authority to bind the town to a contract. And in my opinion, in Foxborough, that would be the Board of Selectmen as the chief executive officer of the town and the town manager, who under the town special act does have contracting authority for the town.
Mr. Costello, are you suggesting that the Board of Selectmen would have to vote it as an example, and then Mr. Keegan would have the right to authorize?
I think it could be either, Kevin, depending on the preference of the community. As long as the designated officer does have the legal authority to enter contracts on behalf of the town, one or the other could do it, in my view. In most communities that I've worked with who have marijuana establishments, it is the Board of Selectmen who votes to approve host community agreements. They may then delegate to the town manager the authority to actually sign the document.
Okay.
Town manager
And one other
cannot-
question, is there any question regarding, so there potentially could be two. And is there any distinction between pure recreational versus medical, or are they combined? Does it make any difference, or?
The subject bylaw in the statute under which it is adopted, Chapter 94G, relates only to recreational adult use. So any medical treatment centers that would choose to locate in Foxborough would not be subject to this particular bylaw. You do have, as you know, a separate zoning bylaw that governs medical facilities.
So Pat, I'm sure you heard what I said. Did I say anything wrong so far? Anything?
No, you did it. I thought it was a great presentation,
Okay.
Paige.
I think Gary had a question.
Thank you. Pat, can the town manager sign for a liquor license? Strictly
No, I
selected.
think, no, the licensing authority of the town, the local licensing authority under the liquor laws is the Board of Selectmen.
Right, I would think this is pretty much the same thing.
Are you concerned that just one signature could make this happen?
No, because it still has to be
Yeah.
voted on by the Board of Selectmen, but why wouldn't it follow the same suit as a liquor license?
Which
They
the Board of
actually-
Selectmen have to sign.
They actually sign and issue it, yes.
So you're saying
Should be
that
the same way.
it should be the same way, so the town manager shouldn't be signing these,
Correct.
is what he's saying.
And I don't know
I
if
don't
that's
disagree.
for
As I said, in
us.
most
I don't know if
communities-
that's
most
for us to
communities,
decide,
It
so I
it
don't
is not
know.
for us to decide. I can't stress enough that, when you go to an auditorium half full of older people that aren't going to understand this, there really can't be any kind of ambiguity or kind of iffy stuff here or there. It just needs to be out there, what you want to do, and, as clear as it could be.
And I think, maybe shortening this PowerPoint a little, but
Yes.
honing in on
But we could talk
having a
about
PowerPoint, I think is going to be key.
At town meeting?
Yes.
So, Madam, whoever, is it you, Tracy, who's the chair tonight, or is it Kevin? Who's the chair
Well,
tonight?
I'm the
Well, that's
chair,
a
but
little
Tracy
Okay.
is, asking questions, or,
Okay.
because I don't have documents in front of me.
There you
I'm
go.
covering for
Unfortunately,
Kevin, Dennis.
My computer.
If I could just make a point here, I know there's ambiguity over that issue of the signing of the agreement, but this isn't even going to affect me personally. So I know that because it's going to be at least a year before this actually even gets acted on at that level. But I would say, given the nature of this, and since it is so new, that my recommendation would be that the selectmen vote it, and then maybe then they either sign it themselves or give the authorization to the town manager to sign it. But I would not think it would be prudent, given the nature of the community that I know, and given the sensitivity to the issue, that the authority should be vested in the town manager for this instance. And while I appreciate Pat's thoughts on this completely, and he's correct technically, I think given the circumstances, probably the best thing to do under the circumstances.
Actually, I think that's wise, Bill.
That was Bill Keegan, our town manager, just in case anybody
We were
wondered.
trying to recognize the voice, Bill.
Sorry about that.
So just to go on, this is the map. I don't know if this is on screen for the public consumption at home, but this, we have come up with a proposed map with no residential areas, and obviously, you know, that it's open for discussion. So the next steps would be a town meeting vote. If passed, the selectmen and the planning board would adopt their own regulations for marijuana applications. Ours would be sort of like, you know how we have special permit regulations, so we'd adopt some sort of regulations for that, outlining specifics. And I imagine the selectmen would come up with their own process to, that list, for example, would go in one of ours or theirs. Then I know the police chief, that if this did pass, he would want to, in the fall town meeting or spring, because we know this wouldn't happen overnight, adopt a rule to prohibit public smoking of marijuana. There's already a rule, but it's just something that gives him the teeth so that he can enforce it. So that's something. And then we anticipate issuing requests for proposals so as to seek the best proposal.
So can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking more about, like, people are going to want to know, so, you know, how is this going to happen, blah, 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 and you've kind of spelled that out, but we've already been approached informally by parties interested in this type of commerce. So let's just say we have a town meeting vote. Is the only way to get from point A to B is through the RFP process, or can someone come in, you know, 3 days later and say, I'd like to get in that queue, you know what I'm saying?
Pat, do you have?
And if so, and the only reason I bring that up, so part of that process is, you've got it spelled out here, is we would need, the planning board would need to, you know, research and adopt some internal regulations. So, I mean, I'm thinking about the sequencing of all that.
Pat, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd be happy to address that, if I may, through you. Each town adopts its own scheme, if you will, for processing these applications. The towns do have some discretion in determining with whom they're going to execute host community agreements. The Cannabis Control Commission's regulations and guidances are very clear on that point. But they also are very clear and very adamant about maintaining a fair and impartial process in establishing rules that render the determination of whom is going to be selected to negotiate a host community agreement that's done in a fair and even-handed manner. My recommendation and suggestion would be that if this bylaw passes and adult recreational use marijuana establishments are allowed to locate in Foxborough, that the Board of Selectmen adopt rules and regulations as the chief executive officer of the town for a process to vet applicants for host community agreements, establish the interview process, some criteria for reviewing and analyzing the prospective applicants. I've done this in another community. They adopted a complete list of criteria that they use when interviewing marijuana establishment applicants. The Board of Selectmen would, in that set of rule and regulations, establish itself as the signatory to the host community agreement, if that is the town's desire. It is the standard and most usual practice for sure. So that would cover the procedural aspect of it, as Paige had noted. The planning board would issue the special permit, obviously. That would be governed by this bylaw with the criteria set forth therein. The local approvals, including in our case, the special permit, is a prerequisite to a final license being issued by the Cannabis Control Commission. And it's up to the town whether or not to issue that special permit, just as it's up to the town, hypothetically, in the judgment of the Board of Selectmen, as to whether or not to execute a host community agreement with any particular applicant. Therein lies the basis for local control. Otherwise, as Paige said, this is very much so a state licensing process, and the state does maintain fairly stringent controls over the issuance of these licenses.
Thank you. So that's my basic presentation for now. I guess I would open it to questions at this point.
Does Mr. Uden have anything to add to the conversation?
I'm just listening, but thank you for your courtesy in asking me. Thank you.
So can I just have another question for Attorney Costello, and just a clarification? I know that he mentioned that medical is not part of this particular thing, but I want to avoid any misconception at town meeting that when we say, okay, based on the current information we have, that 2 stores would be allowed, and now somewhere down the road, a medical facility for retail wants to come in, that people don't feel like, oh, you said 2, and now there's 3 or 4. They don't want to feel like they were misled. So I don't know how we address that, or if we even should address that, but I just want to put it out there so that there's no misconceptions on the part of the body at town meeting feeling like they didn't get full information.
Now, that's a very good point, and I guess the easiest way to explain that is that medical marijuana treatment centers, MTCs they're called, are, from a statutory perspective and from the state regulatory perspective, are entirely separate and distinct from marijuana establishments, which are adult use recreational establishments. The criteria at the state level for issuing licenses or for registering medical facilities are entirely different. Medical marijuana is not subject to the taxes that adult use recreational facilities are. So from the local perspective and from our town meeting's perspective, when we go forward with these articles, is going to be, we're going to focus on this particular bylaw that is before you tonight, relates only to adult use recreational marijuana. And under the proposed bylaw language, we are obligated by law to allow at least 2 based on the percentage of alcohol licenses that we issue in the town.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I don't have any questions.
From the moderator?
I'd just like to echo what Jeff's been saying with regard to informing the townspeople and town meeting when you get there. A lot has been going on, and, less than 2 months to get this done. And the example I keep thinking about is, initially everybody said it's 25% of your package store, thinking it's, just the all alcohol. And we only had 1, retail possible. And also there was talk that there was only 1, cultivation possible. Both were wrong. I think Paige is the one that finally really ran it down to say it's both, beer and wine and all package. And it's not 25%, it's 20%. So that we have 2. And for example, as Attorney Costello said, if the town then asks for an additional package store license through legislation, we get it, then we're gonna have 3. Because in the rules and regulations, if I'm not incorrect, Paige, you round up. So there's a lot of information out there that we need to get out there, and there's been some misinformation, which is really concerning initially. And we've been trying to do a lot in a short period of time. So I just wanted to echo what Jeff was saying with regard to town meeting and getting the information out. And I'd like to applaud Paige for everything she's been doing with getting that information out there. And I thought that was very good, what was there tonight. It's a very good first start with regard to that, and the zoning is it's a big part of it, but also how the town is going to do the negotiations with any prospective, applicant.
Well, I think that's critically important, only because this is coming through the form of a zoning article. without really the other part of it being, put out there for voters. We're not gonna have a ballot question, we've already established that, unless it was just to limit the number of licenses, but just in terms of more generally speaking, we won't be going that route. So, I mean, for everyone out there who's voting, the only thing they're gonna care about the zoning is the overlay map. They're not gonna care about anything else, they're not gonna care about the special permit process. What they're gonna care about is, so how does this happen?
And how many are there possible out there?
So I think that's why it's important, even though technically you wouldn't go that route for a zoning article at town meeting, just to kind of have that, some sort of presentation, which brings me to a procedural question. Normally you would have the chairman of the planning board be making a little report.
Technically, you have to.
Right.
In the state law, the planning board has to do a report with regard to all zoning, so that will be required.
Right.
But if you're talking about a real presentation.
Well, I was talking about the report first,
So that'll be required, but also with regard to, technically you could say, with regard to putting together a discussion of how applications would be come in for the retail.
Right.
In theory, at least, you could say that's beyond zoning and should not be discussed under that zoning article. But I will allow it because it's a big part of whether
Well, I
someone
think
wants to say
one way
yes
you
or
can do
no.
that is because we've combined those two articles, for the purposes of.
It's all zoning, though.
Expediency, I guess.
Well, it's all zoning, and you had to combine those two because one couldn't pass, one failed.
No, I understand.
So,
Right.
but that was still zoning. But the question is, the process with which
Right.
the selectmen are going to determine who gets the retail licenses. Technically, that's not under zoning.
Right.
And, as moderator, I could say, that's not for discussion here. But I think it's an important part with regards to the overall idea of, do we want this in our
It's the
zoning?
most important part, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I think it would be helpful, based on Frank's comments, to give some context as to why this does appear to be rushed. Well, first of all, I was out of the office for 7 weeks, so that was, a setback. Gabby in this department had their hands full and doing a lot of other things. So when I got back, this was my top priority. But also that it kind of came up to us, there was an applicant who approached the town and kind of highlighted the revenue possibilities for the town. And Bill, you correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but, and that sort of raised the awareness for us. I personally have not been paying attention to marijuana since we banned it in 2017. I'm like, good, something I don't have to read all this stuff. So it was a quick crash course for all of us. And the reason why we're kind of feeling like we should do it now is that, first of all, fall town meeting, we all see what that is. 100 people show up. It just doesn't seem the right forum to bring something really important to. We saw what with the accessory apartments. We heard the contact about that, and we heard that. So I think we were hesitant to push it to the fall. And then if we wait for another year, you see the communities around us reaping the financial benefits. So the fear is, and we know it's going to take a year or two probably to get anything open. So this is really, it does appear rushed. There is a little bit of that just because we're trying to not miss the market. And it may be that the townspeople vote that, we don't want to do that, and that's totally fine. But we as a town staff have been sort of scrambling, and we admit it hasn't been fully elegant the whole time as we do this, as we figure it all out. It's all new to all of us. We haven't paid any attention to this. But I saw something like a 1.5 million number pass by. I don't know if you saw that, Frank, at one point. So there have been significant numbers out there passed, and with the fiscal situation and seeing the lack of impacts that we're seeing in Sharon and hearing from Brookline, we started to feel that this is something that it would be beneficial to kind of push it now. But we could delay it, but that's the context of why we're doing it. Bill, do you have anything you want to add to that? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm still not used to working this way, so still trying to figure it out. You did it really well, Paige, said it really well. I think the thing that was most convincing to me that we probably need to start sooner rather than later is that even if we would have passed this fall, or this spring rather, it would take at least another year before you would see the process completed, probably even longer, because of the nature of the process through the state, getting all the applicants in, sifting through the different proposals and knowing how much process-oriented this endeavor is. It's going to take a while. So I think this is really the first step. It's an important step, no question. But I do think that, we did get active on this when we were approached first. We actually were approached about a year and a half ago to start thinking about it, but nobody really had an appetite for it until finally somebody just came forward with a proposal to say, hey, let's start thinking about it. What do you think about this? And then the issue was whether or not it made sense for that person to go forward with the concept in mind. And it was that the concern was that person go through the process and they sponsor the process, they might not actually get the license in the end. So it made better sense for the town to be the advocate for this, and then to sponsor it and make sure it was done the way the town wanted it, as opposed to an applicant. So I think this is the right approach. It is rushed, admittedly, a little bit because of the nature of how it came forward. And of course, timing wasn't great because of course Paige was out during that period of time. She would normally take the lead in these things, but when she came back, she got right to it and really was helpful in trying to pick up some of the pieces. So I do appreciate her efforts here and everything, and everybody's cooperation. I think the two boards have worked really, really well together on this, and of course Pat's help on this has been really, really helpful. So even the police chief and Paige alluded to this earlier, who was really not very much in favor of this initially, has come around because he's talked to his counterparts in the communities where this has taken place and found that the impact has really been very, very minimal. And that to the point where I think Brookline has had, I think, 4 stores in the community right now, and they said the impact has really been minimal. So as Paige pointed out, we did get some really good information from them, and they gave us a few things to watch out for, which has been reflected in the documents you see.
Yeah, and I think, Bill, the point that triggered it for us, and I think it was January, it was the first time we heard of this, was Sharon. I think it kind of hit home when Sharon had they have cultivation and retail, and you don't really even know it. And a little town, I was kind of like, if a town like Sharon's doing it and having no problems, what about Foxborough? So I think that was sort of between being approached and seeing a neighbor that we can relate to, sort of not have an impact and adopt it, was kind of eye-opening to the sort of powers that be, and that's why I think there was a little more appetite this time.
Steve, you have something you wanted to add?
Good evening, thank you all. I have zero appetite for this, and I will oppose this at town meeting if allowed to go to the mic. I've been to several meetings, not caught all of them, but up to this minute, except for a facility placement, I have not one person talk about the effect on the students and children in our community. And I'm going to come in like a fire rocket on that at town meeting. Who is the person or organization that is trying to punch a hole into our process, which we've already established? I can't find an answer in the paper, in minutes, on the TV shows that we broadcast of all our boards. Who's asking for this? People keep going, we were approached. We want to know if we have an appetite. Our town manager, who I have great respect for, Bill, you know that, are using this vague term. Who the hell is it? And if we can't, whoever the we are, and I'm an elected official on a school committee, and I know we always can't say who because of one rule or another, but who the hell is it?
I actually don't have the name.
We don't know?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
neither
the
do I,
answer,
Steve. So
Bill?
I don't have that name, Steve, so.
But Leah must.
And
She
either way,
she brought it up last
technically, they're
week.
not an applicant because they haven't made an application to the town. They've only made an inquiry about it. There was I don't even know the firm's name. They actually approached and came in and asked a few questions about it, and asked if there was an interest in the town and looking at this issue, and gave us some information to look at. But they're not an applicant, and they may be an applicant at some point in time, but they're not an applicant before the town.
So a generic human being walked in, called, text, ESP'd, mailed a letter, whatever, and asked if we had an appetite, and we don't know who the hell that person is. Is that correct?
But what difference does that make, Steve?
I want to know who's trying to come into our town and get
Article
pot
see
to our
if the
kids,
town
Gary.
has an appetite
Huh?
for allowing this. All this article is to see if the town has an appetite to allow it.
That's right. And
We
do
don't
we
have
need a
to have an
two-thirds
applicant
vote to
lined up.
pass this thing?
To pass the zoning, yes.
Two-thirds vote required. So A, I still don't have an answer to my initial question. People won't look at my eyeballs right now while I'm talking. Okay?
No
looking
one's-
at your
No one's
eyeballs.
trying to hide from you. We-
All right.
I
I'm
don't
just
have a
saying.
name.
I'm just
We
saying.
like you.
I'm just saying, I like all of you. We all get along. We all know each other. We've known each other for years. I don't park in front of fire hydrants, and we've bought each other coffee at Cumberland Farms. I get it. But I have a nauseous appetite for this, and I'm no saint. I'm not a perfect man, but I don't want this near my town. We've already established it. I thank you all for your time. I didn't get an answer to my question. I think it's evasive that I didn't get an answer to my question, and we'll see everybody at town meeting. Thank you. I love you all.
Can I, for a minute, Mr.
Sure,
Madden?
go ahead, Kevin. I mean, I'm sorry, let the
If you had
chair.
an got an opportunity to hear Attorney Costello earlier. It really wouldn't make any difference who this individual is if they didn't meet the criteria, and that the state has, been very stringent on, what criteria we're allowed to use. They may not even qualify. So in that sense, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with your perspective on this. I'm just saying even on that basis, they may not be a winning applicant, or they may not qualify for whatever the reasons are that come under the state's regulation.
But Kevin, we sure have a lot of people working on it, spending our town money working on it right now, Kevin.
I can't hear you. I missed
We sure have a lot of people working on it internally, including producing PowerPoint presentations, visiting other communities, running financial analysis for somebody we don't even know who the heck it is.
This is the point. It's
Chasing
not
a
for
buck,
that somebody.
chasing a buck.
It is that it is not for that somebody. I think that we need to make that clear. That somebody may have planted a seed, but there's no obligation or requirement or any assumption that that individual may or may not even meet the criteria to be approved. So, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it's on behalf of any individual who's, as you would say, is trying to punch a hole in our community. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree with your perspective concerning the children or anything else. I don't think that just because we're addressing this, that you're making a presumption that there will be a positive or negative vote at town meeting, or we're trying to leverage a vote at town meeting.
I'm not implying that at all. I just want to know who is the genesis of the revitalization of this issue, and our town employees are spending money researching it. It's a ghost.
I can tell you, I just got some information. It was the owners of Tenanet Road approached
Tenanet,
us.
what is that, a company or
No, it's
a
a street,
location?
it's an address, it's a location in town.
Tenanet Road, I'm sorry, I don't know how to spell that.
Annette, the name Annette?
Oh, Annette, like
Yeah.
Annette Funicello.
Yes.
10 Annette Road. Okay. Thank you very much.
I did not have that
They-
information.
No,
till now.
Paige, I'm not
Yeah,
trying to
I did not-
imply
I did not
there's
have
any
in front of
kind of
me either,
malfeasance going on here.
Well, you did imply that, but.
No,
it's
I
like-
didn't. I said I hadn't heard anybody say who it is, and that it was constantly said that someone applied. I didn't imply that there's any
Said I wouldn't look
malfeasance.
you in the eye, and that made me feel that you were.
I'm sorry. I
So-
was working the room, okay? And you were looking at something else.
At my phone.
But I did not imply that there's any malfeasance.
Steve, it's all very innocent, and I'll tell you how this ball got rolling.
All right.
So the individual at Tenanet Road approached the town about doing some cultivation and/or retail up
Yeah.
on that road, and showed the town individuals, I'm not exactly sure who was there, but, town manager eventually got information on it and showed how much money, revenue, the town could get from it. And they were very interested in it at that point. But they said, you should go out and hire an attorney try to write the zoning. That individual contacted me and came to see me about hiring.
Uh-huh.
I declined. The
Uh-huh.
reason I declined was I told him that even if I wrote it and we got it passed at town meeting, he wasn't guaranteed to get it. And at that point, the assumption that he told me was that there was one retail available. And I said, you know, there will be a number of entities that will try to get to that. So I declined it, and I advised him to go back to the town and say, it's not gonna be in anyone's interest to write it. It really should be the town to do it. He went back to the town and told them that, you know, that he wasn't gonna spend thousands of dollars.
Right. He
in the
wasn't
event
for
that
free.
He was never gonna get it.
Right.
At that point, my assumption is, and I found out later, that the town then really started looking into it and decided, because of the revenue it could possibly generate, that they thought it was in the town's best interest to look into it, bring it forward, and have it vetted. Now, it's gonna be vetted through the selectmen, it's gonna be vetted through the planning board, eventually be vetted through the advisory committee, and eventually it'll get to town meeting if it's decided to be moved forward that way. And the ultimate decision will be at town meeting. So none of these people, you know, nobody said, let's do this. There's no, you know, underlining.
I'm not saying there's a
and
conspiracy.
all
I just
that.
said there's been constant absence of
You know,
information that's important to
I
me
think-
and others in the public, I know.
I think the town officials, you know, did the right thing in looking at it and saying, this is something we should present to the town and see if they want it, yes or no. Because as you can see, other towns all around us are doing it. And again, as Mr. Weinfeld said, you know, I'm not advocating for or against it, but I think it is a subject that at this time, people want to bring forward to town meeting and see if they're for or against it.
Mhm.
You're against it. I absolutely understand your reasoning for it, you know, and we'll see what the town itself does. You know, a lot of discussion had to go into whether we had to do another ballot question to undo that first question. And I got calls on that, and I looked into that and talked with Mr. Cutler and others. And I know Attorney Costello looked into it, and it was decided, no, you do not have to. And if you read the language of it, you know, you don't have to go back and change that. So they're trying to do, and my caution throughout this was, let's not try to run this thing through too fast. And I really thought it was getting pushed too fast. But I'm getting a better feeling about it. Paige has done a lot of work since she's come back. That presentation tonight, you know, I've had a few discussions with her, you know, about it on the phone or out in the hall with the different issues going on. You know, how many retails are really there? How many cultivations can you do? And things like that.
Mhm.
And to make sure the zoning is the best. So there's nothing underlying here.
I'm not
They're bringing it
indicating a
forward.
conspiracy theory.
And
I'm not.
at the end of the day, it'll be up to the townspeople to decide yes or no. And again, it requires 2/3.
Yes.
You know, and I understand why they want to bring it to the annual. You know, that's the big one. You're going to get more people there. You're going to get more discussion. You're going to get more airing of it.
Mhm. Put a 1 in front of all those dollar figures, and I still don't want it because of how it could affect the children in our community. I don't want the money grab. Thank you. I think we all mutually like or love each other down the line here in town, and maybe I shouldn't have had that cup of coffee before I went to the mic.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, good night, thank you. Thanks.
Good night.
Nice, Steve.
I actually think this was a really helpful conversation, so thank you, even though.
I'll be recalled tomorrow.
I don't think so. But no, I think this is, you're probably speaking what other people have been watching this rather indelicate process as we've struggled a bit through this. you know? So this way, I think this was a great conversation, and I think, Frank, you offered some great context, and Bill, so I think this has been helpful to kind of show where we're at and why it looks like we don't know what we're doing. We kind of don't, but that's where we're pulling all our resources and trying to, deliver the best information to the town, and however, like, none of us really cares whether this passes. I mean, honestly, I've worked really hard on it. I don't care. I mean, it was easier when we didn't do it because I didn't have to do all this research, but now that I've done it, it's like, okay, so. I think I've said enough on it.
Pull the warrant. You won't waste any more time.
Any board members have any further questions on this? Kevin, you have anything?
No, I just was hearing what Frank said earlier about the report, and I'm, either I'm comfortable with making the report and reassuring people that, it's been in conjunction with, the selectmen and their role, the town manager and his potential role, the advisory committee and their role, depending on how they vote themselves, and the planning board in terms of trying to create the best zoning process that we can in order to have controls over this. And then again, but the final analysis, as Frank just said, is that it's going to be up to the body. The town meeting will make its decision known.
Right. And I will say about the children thing, because, I've been doing a little bit of research, I totally get it. And as a mom of two who are older but not quite old enough, I guess 2 points is, one, it's already there. I mean, it's next door, it's everywhere, so the kids are probably already getting it. You have to be 21 and older, so I'm sure they're somehow getting it in some way. But the other thing, as a mom, I've had to think about this, is honestly, I would rather my children, my two boys, they're 19 and 23, I would rather them buy a joint from a marijuana facility, like off the street, whatever, because they're not, if my 19-year-old, than from some drug dealer who's not regulated. So again, it's you don't want your kids ever buying a joint, but if they were going to, at least the stuff that's going through the retailers is tested and safe. And so as a mom, what I worry about is like a fentanyl lace joint or something. So that's my non-scientific, but I'm like, again, I don't want my kids to do it, but I do have fear about the untested out there. And I wonder if, I don't know that this is going to result in more of the higher grade stuff out there, but I don't know.
You have a glass of orange juice and talk sometime.
Sounds good.
Some very interesting stories for you.
So thank you.
If I could just say one final word on the issue and why it's important to consider this, is that it's my obligation to always bring forward opportunities where we can increase local revenue, and if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be doing my job either. So I think it's really important that when somebody suggests something to me and then we start taking a look at it and see how much of an impact it is, what really made up my mind that this is really something we should pursue was when the report came out, and I think it was December or January, saying that the revenue from marijuana sales actually surpassed alcohol sales, and I think that's a significant milestone in that respect. So by looking at that perspective, you can have your position relative to whether you think you like the concept or not. That's one thing. I think the issue is it's actually legal all around us, and the question is Foxborough interested in participating in that or not? And the answer is going to be up to the community to decide. It's really up to them to decide, and not for me or Paige to do that. It's our responsibility to put the information in front of you.
Thank you, Bill. I respect the heck out of you. I really do. I understand.
Thank you.
It's an uneasy place to be.
Frank, you might want to remind people or remind folks, either at town meeting or, beforehand in some way, literature that in a more normal time, like we did back in 2017, even though it was a non-binding question, it was set up on the ballot. And that came very close to passing. Now, it was non-binding, but it was a very narrow margin of defeat. Or actually, it was for a ban, so it was affirmative.
Are you talking about the one that was with the zoning?
Yeah.
With the zoning with the medical marijuana? Well,
Yes.
see, you had to pass that.
No.
Otherwise,
No, we had a non-binding ballot question.
well, it's considered non-binding, but under the way the state statute was written, if you didn't put that ballot question, and Pat Costello probably could answer this better than I, if you didn't put that in front of the town meeting, then it was allowed. if you didn't put that ballot question in front of not town meeting, on the ballot question
Yep.
for the voters, and if, you know,
Yes, yes.
then.
Right.
Then
My
marijuana
only
would have
point-
been allowed.
My only point was, that was just a straight majority vote, and it was very, very close. And now there's going to be a much higher threshold
Right.
for positive action. So, I mean, I don't think we have to apologize about anything.
No.
No.
All right, well, next conversation will be
Motion
at
to
the
adjourn.
The selectmen will be discussing this matter at their meeting Tuesday night, so just stay tuned, more fun.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, good night.
As I mentioned, we're going to skip over item 4 and go right into item number 5. Do we have Paige? Do we have Pat? We can probably, I know we've got Katie up on the screen, but maybe we could switch the view.
Also, George Samia is on as well.
Okay, great. I think he's here for the budget one, yeah.
And Pat's on too?
Pat's on, yep.
Yeah.
Look,
And just Paige too, yeah.
you want Paige to be on video?
Yes.
Good evening, Pat.
Ladies and gentlemen.
All right, good evening, everyone, and I think
Paige?
there's a PowerPoint that's in board docs, but I think it made sense for Christina to bring it up as well. So just to set the stage of this, I think we're here maybe, I don't know, the third or fourth time in our meetings talking about this. Did everyone have a chance to watch planning board, or?
Yes.
So a lot of this will probably be repetitive from planning board, but I thought it was helpful for us to put together a PowerPoint to kind of guide the discussion, rather than just looking at this giant bylaw and, you know, seeing if we have questions. So that's where we're at with the document that you saw put together. I will review it briefly, and Paige and Pat, feel free to chime in, of course, if you have anything to add in addition to what I say. I'm just trying to get it to open here, and it's not opening for me.
It's up on the board now if you want.
Okay. All right, great. So, the marijuana bylaw we're here to talk about tonight, we will not be taking a position tonight. We'll do that next meeting with the rest of the Board of Selectmen warrant items, as well as the citizens petition. So we still have a little bit of time, you know, to have this presented, ask some questions, and if we need to make any changes to the bylaw, you know, that's really the intent of what we're looking to do this evening. So here we have a timeline. I'm not going to go over everything here, but basically, you know, from the decriminalization of marijuana to, you know, our ban back in 2017 to where we are today, re-looking at having recreational marijuana here in town. So with the next slide. All right, so why change Foxborough's rules now? I think, you know, we kind of talked about this, but just to recap, you know, back in 2017, it was something that was new. It was a little bit scary. I think we did not have an appetite to be one of the first communities to take this on. But since then, many communities have gone before us, even some of our neighbors like Sharon, Plainville, and Mansfield. So, you know I had thought, is it something that's worth putting out to the town? Obviously, none of us have any, you know, it can go either way, but it's something to take to the town to relook at because of some of the impacts that we could have to the community. So with that, we did a bunch of research, and just to go back, sorry, someone did approach us as well. So you probably heard that on planning board, a property owner up off of Route 1, and they had thought about doing it as a citizen's petition, much like the sign bylaw that we're gonna hear later today. And then ultimately it was decided that, you know, that didn't make sense because they could bring it forward and then, you know, not get the license. So to keep it kind of more fair, we thought it made sense for the Board of Selectmen to sponsor the article, but it will go through the planning process since it is a zoning article. So we did research with a number of different communities, the town of Brookline being one of the first adopters of retail marijuana establishments, kind of lessons learned, what do we need to, you know, what didn't you think of to put in your bylaw that we should think of? Town council, Pat, who's on the phone, has gone through this in a number of different towns, so, you know, we came up with a starting point and then massaged it as such to where it works for Foxborough, or where we think it works. And then there was a number of different meetings between boards and departments and various folks to create the warrant and then make the feedback, and you've seen, planning board and other departments and other boards as well. So there will be a public hearing, again, since it is part of the zoning process. Paige, what's the date look like on that? I know you've told me, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
April 14th.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if we can go to the next slide. All right, so I'm not going to read through all of this, and I believe we have this up on the web, or if not, we'll have this revised version up very shortly. But you can see there certainly are some tax benefits to communities that decide to allow recreational cannabis. And the last fact is actually interesting. As of December 2021, the state took in more from cannabis than alcohol. So there's that kind of pivot. If we can keep going. So Paige pulled together some populations of various communities around us, kind of near and far, different sizes. And you can see what it's meant to them. And then we've also talked to some of those communities to see, okay, here's the numbers, but, tell us, what does this look like for your community? What's the good Ben? What's the bad Ben? Keep going. All right, so,
Can I ask a quick question? Is that the 6%? Does that represent the 6%, of which half is temporary?
Paige, is that correct? That's what I understand. That's the whole piece they've taken in, not just the 3% so far on the previous slide.
I actually can't be sure.
I would think
I
it's
would
the
have to
whole-
look at
the
the
whole piece,
column.
but the other 3%.
I feel like
Actually, it's broken
either
down.
3 or 6%.
I'm sorry, Paige, I didn't interrupt. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill, if you have any better information.
Yeah, so there was a chart that we were able to extract from the state that actually provided two columns. One was revenue that came directly from the tax, and the other column was the impact fee, if you will. And that's also equivalent to 3%, or in some cases, it was actually paid out as a lump sum in some cases. So I don't know that the numbers on that chart is actually reflective of all of the 3 plus 3, if you will. I think that the number that you saw that was just displayed is strictly the tax income from it itself.
Thank you.
So that's impactful.
And
Yeah.
And if I may note, if you know, one town like Rowley had a $30,000 number. That was because that was called out in the second column. So I kind of took that to be as like some payoff or something. So none of the other communities had 2 columns worth. So I took that to be the tax on the left, and then the right to be like the bonus, sort of the extra payment or impact fee, something like that.
That's exactly right.
But we can provide the raw data. We have that available. It was very poorly labeled, so that's why we know so very little.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to know if that's what you'd expect every year or half of that every year. Those towns.
So you would get the amount of money that you see, and the reason why the information that we had was as of a certain date and time. So the information that we had was from, I believe it was from as of December of this past year. So it actually changes. It's a moving target, obviously. So we don't. There's no. It's a rolling number that goes from month to month because it's collected on a monthly basis.
Sure, that's an annual number though?
That number that's not necessarily an annual number. That's
Number's just,
that's a moment in time when that was collected.
well, it's a moment in time, but it's over a period of time.
Yes, right. So I can't tell you the exact number of months that are in that number, but I can tell you that it's as of when that was extracted, which was about December of this past year.
It says, I'm sorry, I was just looking it up. I wanted to get it. It says revenue for fiscal year 2021. So that does represent one fiscal year, but we don't have an adequate breakdown as to like how much of that would be 3% and how much would be, the bonus 3%.
Yeah,
I have a feeling it's all the towns got, and a lot of them are in their early years. So most of it right now is the highest amount, obviously, I would imagine.
Okay.
And maybe Pat would know better because this is an area I'm not too familiar with.
So I looked at that information page, and it was the higher number. You were correct. The left column was the actual rolling tax, and the other one is the impact fee, which in some cases can be an additional 3%, or it can be a flat number, which in some cases was a pretty high number, which they paid up front. It was like a,
Yeah,
like a
many
multi.
cities had very high numbers,
So,
but
yeah.
that's, I didn't want to put any cities on the example
Right.
because we're not like that, so that's why, but yeah, the big numbers were definitely in the cities for the big, impact fee or whatever bonuses they got. Up in, Attleboro, very high at almost $1 million, so some of them are high.
And I think you have like a root document that you could send to Seth, right? I think I saw it at some point, that's why I knew there was
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet.
timeframe on it, I just couldn't
Yeah.
remember exactly what it was to, not
And
misspeak.
it, like, I'd like to know, and I think we should just know if we, whenever this goes, people look at this, we should just be very buttoned up about what that 325 represents for Sharon. If that's half or all, that they might, it's an average and it's a moving target, but what's in that? So,
That's,
Yeah,
I
that's
actually
gotta be wrong,
Googled, I actually Googled
I
that
just did
after. Same exact thing, and isn't that surprising about
Yeah.
the populations?
that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not the population of Sharon. It's over 17, it was 17,000, 2010.
So
It's gonna be missing a 10,000.
we need to look at that, but I thought I Googled it.
Oh, did I miss a one?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, in 2010, it was 17,006. I think we might be 2 in front of it.
So we've got to clean this up and add maybe some, the fiscal year that it is as well.
So it was fiscal '21, that would have been as of June 30th of last year, but it was probably reported as of December. So I got this information directly from Department of Revenue, from Seth, Sean Cronin, and he was able to, but it was, Paige was correct, it was poorly labeled, so it really made it difficult for us to determine.
2020, the population was 18,571.
So we can figure it out and then.
Yes, fair enough.
We'll know.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's a fair
just so
question.
people know that. the
Yeah, I'm
numbers
sure
are
we'll see
correct.
this presentation a number of times, so any feedback we have
Yeah.
to make it more clear to everyone, I think is exactly what we're here for tonight.
Yep.
Great.
So our role, going to the next slide, obviously we know marijuana is now legalized in the state of Massachusetts, but our role as a town is we can adopt our own licensing process and bylaws to allow it, execute the host community agreement, which you guys have seen. But it is a very heavily regulated industry with state laws, so the Cannabis Control Commission does have quite a heavy hand in a lot of it. So concerns and considerations, what did we think about when we were doing the first draft and, the various drafts? We knew we didn't want marijuana in or around our business uptown, and we didn't want it, sensitivity to residential areas. And then we also were thinking about pre-existing, schools. I know there was a question that came up on planning board about the ice rink over on West Belcher. And I think that's where, Paige, correct me if I'm wrong, but we will have the discretion, although we have the overlay map, to look at each of these and see what's right for our community, because it is by special permit. So it's not by right, it is special permit that the planning board's able to really look at these and see, what's right for the various areas within the overlay. So things that have changed since the last meeting, like we said, I think Paige was really honest that this is new to a lot of us. We have town council obviously helping us, but it's a lot of information to digest, and some things have changed. So since Foxborough has 10 package stores, we are looking at 2 marijuana retailers, not 1. If we wanted to go less than 2, we would have to do a ballot. So we are looking at 2. That is something that has changed. And then we had talked about not allowing delivery drivers and couriers, but we realized that if they're licensed by the Cannabis Control Commission, which is what that CCC stands for, we can't prohibit them from basically driving through and delivering in the town. I mean, essentially, that's probably already happening today, without us even knowing.
Question before we go on. What about the discussion of cultivation? That was also a side thing about licensing cultivation. Are we not going to be discussing that at all? They didn't really discuss that at the planning board meeting either. So that was one of my takeaways.
Yeah, Paige or Pat, I'll let you guys chime in there. I don't believe that we'll have a limit on those, but things have been changing and evolving. I don't want to misspeak.
I'd be happy to address that, Madam Chair. In order for the town to prohibit the operation of one or more distinct types of marijuana licensed operations, we would have to go to the ballot. We would need a ballot question in order to adopt a bylaw that restricts any particular type of licensee from operating within.
So we're looking at both.
So,
Right.
so Pat, would could potentially, is a cultivation plant considered a retailer?
No, a cultivator is a cultivation license is a separate license issued by the Cannabis Control Commission. It's a separate class of license. It is considered for the purposes of our bylaw to be a marijuana establishment. Thus, it is subject to the special permitting provisions and all of the other conditions of the bylaw. However, it is a type of marijuana establishment that, again, is licensed separately by the Commonwealth. And in order for the town to prohibit the operation of a particular type, it would have to go to the ballot and obtain ballot approval to adopt a bylaw.
So they would apply for a license from us as what?
As well, they don't apply for licenses from us. That's a point that I think we should really make clear. The only license that's issued for marijuana establishments is issued by the Cannabis Control Commission at the state level. As the chair had noted earlier, the Cannabis Control Commission bears the primary responsibility for vetting and determining whether or not these particular establishment operators are well suited for their proposed enterprises. What we can do at the local level is adopt a bylaw that reasonably regulates time, place, and manner by which such establishments operate. So the Board of Selectmen will not be issuing any licenses for these establishments. The principal role that the Board of Selectmen will fulfill is to approve and execute a host community agreement, which is a prerequisite to an establishment operator filing an application for a license at the Cannabis Control Commission. So the selectmen will have a chance to vet the various proposed operators that want to come into the town to do business, and you'll have to approve and execute a host community agreement, which would establish terms of operation before they can move on in the process. They would then have to go before the planning board, obtain a special permit pursuant to this bylaw, assuming that obviously that it's adopted, and they would need to comply with all other building requirements within the town. They'll have to get appropriate permits from the building inspector, have whatever permits or approvals are needed for waste disposal systems and the like. They'll be subject to those requirements, but there is not a separate license that is issued by the town above and beyond the special permit.
So Pat, how many cultivators could we have in town? How many could we be looking at if we pass this?
You could be looking at as many as you feel the town is capable of hosting reasonably. If you choose not to execute a host community agreement with an applicant, then they're dead in the water. They don't move forward. Now, I say that with the caveat that the Cannabis Control Commission has indicated clearly in all of its guidelines and the regulations so state that it's up to the local municipality to determine whether or not to execute a host community agreement with an applicant. However, you do have to be reasonable, fair, and equitable in the way you review host community agreements. What I would recommend, and what is done in many communities, is in the event that this bylaw should pass and the prohibition that is now in effect in Foxborough is rescinded, what I'd suggest we do is work toward preparing some rules or regulations that the Board of Selectmen would adopt, setting forth certain criteria and a process for the application for a host community agreement and the standards that would be applicable when the board is reviewing host community agreements. Having that criteria in writing in the form of a rule, regulation, or guideline will be very critical and very important to the board in terms of establishing a standard set of criteria that would allow the board to rebut arguments that it's acting arbitrarily or capriciously and allowing, a host community agreement in one case, yet choosing to deny it in another. So that's a suggestion I would make as we move forward with the process.
One last question, Pat, again. Sure. Leah, if it's okay?
Of course.
So if someone wants to cultivate and get a 100,000 square foot warehouse, any potential income would just be the regular taxes on a warehouse. There would be nothing above and beyond when they sell it to the retailer. It'd just be regular business taxes for a warehouse.
That's correct, Doc. They would be taxed based upon the percentage of gross sales that they make from their cultivated product. And there would be likewise a community impact fee that would be applicable. And the community impact fee has to be based on actual expenses that the town incurs or anticipates that it will incur in taking measures to secure the community's interests in light of the new business enterprise. So we can talk about that in more detail if you'd like, but the community impact fee has without question been the most controversial topic within this statutory scheme since its adoption. And there are currently pending on Beacon Hill, in fact, 2 bills that are moving through the general court review process that, could substantially affect the community's practices when imposing community impact fees in these situations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, go ahead.
Just real quick. So it looks like the language around superseding federal law has been removed from the...
Yes.
Okay, right, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't know where that came from in the first place. And as I looked at it in more detail after our last discussion, it really didn't make any sense or have any great impact in my view in terms of the substance of the agreement. And I thought it was subject to varying interpretations as well. So the bottom line is, as is typically the case, if there is a federal or state law that pervasively addresses a certain area or subject matter, we cannot adopt a local bylaw that supersedes or is inconsistent with that applicable state or federal law. So that, in my view, would not need to be stated expressly in the bylaw.
Okay, and then just real quick, and maybe this is more of my own curiosity, but just maybe also people will want to know what they're getting is, so if there's a marijuana retailer, people, of age, I guess, can walk in and buy their dime bag or whatever they do, and then is there also, is that what you call it?
That's the street slang.
There you go.
I know, you go there and order in a dime bag.
Nickel? I don't know.
Haven't heard that in a while, but that's okay.
Will there also be pot brownies and cookies and lollipops and pot gummy bears and all of that stuff?
Yes, there's edibles.
But they're not allowed to consume them, so that's, I guess, what's coming next.
Yes.
Is, that's the next thing, but we're not even looking at that, is you will be able to consume these things on property, almost like a bar, that some other community may look at, however, we are not looking at that for the purposes of this, here.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay.
So I have one question. So I just want to make sure I have it right. So there's no equation for cultivation based on population or liquor licenses or anything. So we could have, so if the commission decides they could, give out 50 licenses, or, I mean, I'm using a large number, which I'm sure that's not going to happen, but my point is they can give whatever they want. We don't
Well,
have
no,
any-
if you go to the approval process, they have to make it through us and the host community agreement.
Okay,
Before they, so this is it's kind of long, it's 2 slides, but I'm gonna really give you guys the cliff notes.
Yeah.
You come to the town for the host community agreement, then you go to the Cannabis Control Commission, and that's when you start with the planning board. So you basically don't even get to those next pieces if you haven't executed
Okay.
with us. And we don't have to entertain, certainly, Pat, jump in at any time if I'm misspeaking, obviously 50
Sure.
cultivation, it's whatever
Yeah.
feels right for us. The retail, we have to allow at least
The
2.
retail, there is that.
But we may not get 2, we
Yeah.
may get 2 applicants, we may not, but we would have to look at least 2 if we looked at this without a ballot question.
So we have a little more say in the number for cultivation than we do. I mean, the other one is gonna be based on the liquor licenses, flat out.
Well, you minimally have 2. So, and then,
Minimum,
if you
yeah.
want
I'm
to, if
talking
you,
about for cultivation.
yeah, for cultivation, yeah.
All of them, we could
it's-
have, we could have 50 if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But I don't think that our community has an
Yeah,
appetite
yeah.
for that.
Right. If I may, Madam Chair, in my experience, cultivation facilities generally require a lot of space, either outdoors or indoor areas. They're very secure. Many of the towns in central and western Massachusetts that have a lot of open land are, quite frankly, very eager to lure cultivating operations to their community because of the remoteness that they have. It's suitable. In a community like Foxborough, which does have a very substantial, residential community, business community established already, there may or may not be a location within the town that you, the Board of Selectmen, deem is appropriate for cultivation. If there is, you would vet with the applicant the specific location that he, she, or it intends to utilize for the facility. You would vet with them their proposed plans for mitigation of any odors, sound, noise, what have you, whatever quote-unquote nuisance type factors could be created by a cultivating facility. And only if and when the board reaches a level of satisfaction that it would not be harmful or would be in the best interest of the community to proceed with that proposal, would you execute a host community agreement. If you don't execute a host community agreement, the operator really has nowhere to go.
Okay, perfect.
So going to the next slides, and again, it does go over 2 slides, and I'm really condensing it, but it's host community agreement, Cannabis Control Commission's provisional license. During that time, they may apply to the Board of Selectmen, and then it all happens. So, if this were to pass, we're probably looking at a year, from our understanding, from start to finish, based on all the steps that are required. And there is a number of, public process before the host community agreement, can be executed as well. So I think we can let you guys read that, and then we'll probably go down to Foxborough's proposal slides. So I think this kind of sums up what we talked about. Retail, too, marijuana establishments, which is the definition for cultivation, as we said earlier. Social consumption is not allowed, so, while you may buy something that has marijuana in it, you're not allowed to consume it there. There's like a bar, you're not allowed to do that. Delivery is permitted because we cannot prohibit that. And then we have the proposed overlay map. And, Paige, I don't know if obviously your board hasn't approved this yet, or I know that there was some concerns, particularly around, I'm going to call it Foxfield Plaza, but that's not the name. Forbes Crossing, sorry, I couldn't think of it. What feels right, but you'll see it generally runs along our 2 more commercial sections of town, away from residential and our uptown businesses, as we spoke about. And even there is guidelines at the state level around that 500 feet that we talked about. I know it came up on planning board about the fence. And when I read it, it looked like there is a definition for how that works. And again, the skating rink came up, and we have the ability to look at that when evaluating the host community agreement to say, does this feel right or not? And kind of stop it there if we thought so. And again, it is a special permit. It's not by right. So it does give us more control once it gets to the planning board as well. So next steps from here, I guess before town meeting vote, there will be another planning board meeting, because this is a zoning article. It does need a public hearing, as we spoke about. I'm sure we'll have more education sessions. Bill, you're going to, not only this warrant article, but you're doing something in this room. Again, I just may need you to refresh me on the date about the warrant as a whole. So remember where he used to go to the Council on Aging and do one on TV? Now that COVID's kind of over, condensing that and doing that here with the seniors or anyone else that wants to attend and televise it.
When is it?
It will be, it's usually like the last weekend.
April 27th
Yeah,
at 2
last
p.m.
weekend in April, yeah.
Good.
So from here, town meeting will vote. Again, it is zoning, so it will need 2/3. If it is passed, we'll need to adopt regulations. We'll have to, look at the host community agreement. Chief Grace did also want to adopt a new bylaw to prohibit the public smoking of marijuana, which we don't have, which we would be doing in the fall town meeting. We didn't want to put it on here because if it doesn't go through, we don't need to look at that, and we certainly have time. And then, to remain competitive, we could issue a request for proposal or an RFP seeking best financial packages, to look at those 2 licenses all at once, rather than, have them come in here, spot here to really pick what's best for the community.
We have.
Madam Chair, may I just interject for 1 second?
Yep.
This is Pat. I do believe you have a general bylaw, section 162-1, that prohibits public consumption of marijuana products on public property and public places. So we may want to beef it up or amend it, but I think there is something on the books right now.
Yeah, Chief Grace had some concerns, so he's already mentioned that in our preliminary discussion, so I believe he does have some thoughts on that.
Okay.
So with that, it's a lot of information, but I thought that the PowerPoint just kind of helped guide it a little bit. I think that the bylaw is in a good position from Paige's standpoint, from Bill's standpoint, from Pat's standpoint. Do we have anything else? I know Planning Board weighed in. There were some changes that came out of that. I did come here and sit in on AdCom, and there were some questions that came up on that we massaged things. Something that has come up, do we want to create like a subcommittee to look at the host community agreements with us then formally approving them? That was a suggestion of someone not on this board. I don't feel passionately about it either way, but I am open, to it. If we wanted to have a group take a look at it ahead of time, maybe it's someone from Selectmen, Planning, AdCom, or residents, to make a recommendation to us. That's something that has come up that I don't think that we've necessarily discussed at the table yet.
I think we have plenty of time to think about that.
Okay, yeah.
But, I could go either way.
Yeah, so just think, so that that is something that did come up, that someone had mentioned, so. Anything else on this one? Nope, and like I said, not our last meeting. We do still have the next meeting where we'll take our positions and get the warrant closed, and if anything comes up between now and then, certainly reach out to Bill, Paige, or me, and we can, talk about it or get it in here, especially if it's around clarifying something.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention what an incredible job everyone's done on this, from beginning to where we are now, having a pretty good grasp of a bylaw change, from zoning to planning to Bill, your office, certainly Paige coming on board, running.
Yeah, I think Paige really hit the ground running on this
Yeah.
one.
I think
so
Paige
literally-
expected to come back to this.
Nice,
so-
easy, relaxed.
She picked it up
return
really
to
quick,
work.
so I'm really grateful for that too, because there was a lot to digest in this one.
Yeah,
No
it's
question.
come a long way from point A to point B, and, like Paige said, we had a lot to learn and a lot to digest and a lot of people to talk to and a lot of, cross-collaboration to get through, but I think that, we've done that, and there's still more time if there's anything else that we need to take a look at.
I think the planning board has really become a lot more comfortable with the approach as well. And I'm really grateful for Pat's help in this too, because
and Pat.
it's been really, really helpful, so.
All right, great. So I think we're going to move into the sign bylaw. And I will mention that the public hearing for the marijuana article, I believe, is the 14th. So that is in 2 days. I know I will tune in, you can watch it. Anyone in the public, since it is a zoning article, it is an open meeting here in this room. So that public hearing is happening on the 14th. I just wanted to mention that as well.
And they're just specifically, the marijuana article is 21 and the billboard article is number 22, so you guys are pulling up the rear, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, you guys, are they dead last?
They're dead last.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good thing Frank has to be there all night anyway.
Right?
Right.
All right, so with that, I think that we are ready to have a motion to approve and sign the final 22 annual town meeting warrant.
Like you just said, motion to approve and sign the finalized 2022 annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. So I'm going to skip the next one on taking positions because it just doesn't make sense with just two of us, but I think I've broadly mentioned my position on everything on there.
Warrant article, Code of the Town of Foxborough, Section 162.7, and zoning bylaws 7.5. Amend the Code of Foxborough Town restricting and deleting sections 162.7 and 275-7.5.8, and amend the zoning bylaws by adding new section 7.6, marijuana establishments and marijuana retailers, and amend the zoning bylaws by adding a new map entitled Marijuana Overlay District, Foxborough, Mass. as, excuse me, Attachment 6. I am going to recuse myself from this portion of the hearing. Tracy will be taking over.
Thank you. Paige?
Yes, so this is a public hearing in support of an article that's on town meeting floor this spring. The town meeting's scheduled for May 9th. Just a little background that seems to provide some good context. The town of Foxborough was approached by some marijuana people in the business, and they were looking into whether the town of Foxborough would reconsider their ban on marijuana. They presented some information about sort of the financial benefits and pointed out that many towns around Foxborough are currently selling marijuana and having minimal impact, so that was presented. They let us know that they were intending to file a citizen petition, or a petition, as a landowner petition, to seek this out. At that point, it was advised that it might not be wise to have a single petitioner do that, because there's no guarantee that the person who changes and writes the zoning and changes it is going to be the one who ultimately gets a license from the Cannabis Control Commission. So at that point, the selectmen took it under advisement, and they decided to put it on the warrant to allow the townspeople of Foxborough to decide whether this is something that the town wants to consider. So that's kind of the background. There's really no real agenda. Like, the town doesn't necessarily have any skin in the game except what I'll go through, but that's where this came from and why it's being reconsidered. So here's the timeline. We have a slideshow up here. As you know, well, as you may recall, in 2008, mass voters voted to decriminalize marijuana, and then they went on to legalize medical marijuana, recreational marijuana. In May of 2017, Foxborough banned recreational marijuana, and then in 2018 was when the first marijuana retailers opened up in Massachusetts. We probably all remember the lines and all the news reports and whatnot. So why are we changing it now? Back in 2017, it was actually passed when there weren't even any regulations out. If you recall, it was a citizen or some sort of petition that got it passed. So the state had to quickly catch up and implement regulations to support this new law that went into effect. So at the time, Foxborough wasn't certain. No one really knew what was coming, and there was a lot of fear around the marijuana and what the impacts would be. Since now, we discussed, it's been legal for a while now, and we're starting to see them come. Here's some nearby marijuana retailers. Sharon had one open in August 2020, Plainville in February 21, and Mansfield is in October 2021. And that, in fact, I didn't notice it till recently that it's right over by White's Bakery. It's actually in a retail plaza. The big joke is it went from Orange Leaf to Relief is apparently the name of it. So it's kind of funny. But I had no idea, when I was there that was what it was. So at that point, obviously there was a little concern around it. I mean, why would we ever even consider this? The first inclination, even by the police chief, when we brought it up, was hard no. But then the research was done. Brookline was one of the first towns that had a dispensary opened. So they actually came out, remember the police department came out and met with the selectman, town manager, police chief and whatnot, and sat down and gave them a lot of really great advice. And I know that the police chief has talked to all the communities around us that have marijuana facilities, and he is actually, I don't want to speak for him, but his concerns seem to be quite alleviated. So I'll let him speak for himself, but their initial reaction doesn't seem to be the current reaction. We've been working with town council. As we all know, this board has talked about this exhaustively, but this is the first time we're actually having a formal public hearing. There's been a lot of meetings to review the drafts, and we've been trying to incorporate feedback as it comes up. So let's get really to what it is. Massachusetts has received over $122 million in tax revenue for the first 2 years. There's a tax on it, and there's also a local options tax. So that's where the towns start to see a benefit. You probably all heard the news that in December 2021, the state actually received more money from cannabis halfway through the year than they had from liquor for the first time. So obviously that's a trend we're seeing throughout the state. Here's a little snapshot of some of the communities around us, and then some other communities that we were able to find in the state that seemed smaller and more Foxborough-like. I didn't want to compare to like a Marlboro or a Salem, where they really aren't Foxborough. But these are some of the community, the revenues that the towns have received. Sharon being most notable up there, and Plainville. They started later, so they have less. But you're seeing sort of the impact there. So that's the main reason I think that the selectmen said, you know what, this is something that the residents should decide, because this is a lot of money to leave on the table. We also did move somewhat quickly because we feel that the competition is getting more and more stiff, and there's even some concerns that, not every marijuana retailer is going to survive. I don't know, we don't know that, but that's what we're sort of hearing. So we want to maybe get in before the market starts to go down, if it's going to go down. So what can the town do? This is a heavily regulated state, process. The town can do some form of regulation, their local control, but we can't go too crazy. We can't add extra setbacks and whatnot. We can't make it so hard that they couldn't comply. But we can't, and we could pass a bylaw limiting the number of marijuana establishments to 20 or more, to fewer than 20%. But that is not what's being proposed right now. That would require a ballot and whatnot. So we're just not taking that on. And I'll get into what can be done. So concerns and considerations and sort of what we've been talking about. We don't want any marijuana in and around uptown Foxborough. We're trying to be sensitive to residential areas. One note is that under state law, a marijuana establishment can't be within 500 feet of a pre-existing public or private school. We did look into it. That distance cannot be increased. So that's something that had been asked. We originally thought we could only have one marijuana retailer, but because we have 10 package stores, we could actually have 2. If that number went up to 11 package stores, then it could go up to 3. So at that point, but the current bylaw we have written limits it to 2. But we would, if the town of Foxborough, if they adopted this, wanted to then go ahead and limit it to 2, it would have to be a ballot in addition to this action. And we just kind of wanted to do it sort of piecemeal to see where our time should be. If we can't prohibit delivery. One of the things that we had in there is no delivery in town, but it turns out you can't do that. People could be getting deliveries right now, and turns out that's one of the things. We could prohibit our retailers for delivering to our residents, but that doesn't seem wise because outside deliveries could come. So that was just sort of a conservative approach to it. So here's an example of a process. What would happen is if this did pass at town meeting, then the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board would each adopt regulations, kind of like our special permit regs. But traditionally what you'd see is an applicant would meet with the administration, then you start working on a host agreement, and then you start negotiating. This is another town's process that they try to lay out, a strict format, but obviously you're going to negotiate. One of the things we're thinking of doing is actually putting out, sort of saying we have 2 licenses and we're seeking applicants, and it'll be sort of everybody submit at once and we kind of figure out what we can do. We haven't yet looked into how we've done it, but we've seen other communities do that, so we might approach it that way. So we sort of get the highest and best user at once. We can really consider the locations. The host community does have quite a bit of latitude. That said, you can't be unfair. You have to negotiate in good faith. Once the host community agreement is approved by the Board of Selectmen, then they file with the Cannabis Control Commission to get a provisional license, and at that point is when they would come to the Planning Board for a special permit and any other local permits. Only if they get local permits can they get a license from the state. And then at that point would they get their license. So right now we're looking at 2 retail establishments. As I said, that's based on the number of package stores. There's no limit on cultivation, but again, that would also be, special permit and reviewed by the community. We are not proposing any social consumption. That is something that's being discussed right now, where you actually like create like a marijuana cafe and you go hang out and you smoke your weed or drink your, I don't know. But that's not on the table for this right now. That's not something we're doing. I don't even think it's allowed in the state yet, but if it's allowed in the state, it would not automatically be allowed under this zoning. And like I said, delivery, we would not be prohibiting that because we can't. The map is also on the table over there, but here's an overview of the map. It's basically up on the Route 1 area and then down around the sort of industrial areas near 95. So that's the proposed locations. Next step is a town meeting vote on May 9th. And then if it passes, like I said, the planning board and the board of selectmen would adopt regulations. And then we know that the police chief wants to tighten up our public smoking rules. So then he would make sure that, it already isn't allowed, but to really make sure it's enforceable. And then we would likely issue a request for proposals to seek the best financial package and location for the communities. So that is pretty much it. I know this board has heard this ad nauseum. I don't know if anybody, I know you all aren't necessarily here for this, but if you have any questions.
No questions. I think no one here has any questions, honestly. But I did want to say, because we have a good number of people here in attendance tonight, that that's pretty good background for folks who haven't, maybe seen or read anything about this particular article here in Foxborough yet. And you may be seeing something similar, if not identical, at town meeting, right? So, I mean, that gives you a little bit of background. What I want to say is, so why is this process going through and being steered by planning board? Well, it's not really being steered by the planning board. No one at this table put this on the town meeting warrant. Board of Selectmen supported this article and made a decision to put it on the warrant, and Paige kind of explained why that is. The reason it's going through this board is because fundamentally it's a zoning article. Now, it's a little bit of a hybrid because there are some regulatory matters and issues that are folded into it that normally wouldn't be in straight zoning, but it is essentially a zoning article, and as such would require a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting. So if anyone was wondering about that. As I said, I don't think there was any real advocacy here by members of this board seated at this table, but I will say, we spent a lot of time over the past 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, working and reworking this zoning, mainly because it would be irresponsible of us to do anything but. And I personally don't really have a strong disposition whether this passes or not at town meeting, but I am very confident, if it does, that the zoning will be in place in this article to give the town the ability to responsibly regulate this commercial activity. So I just wanted to put that out there before we get going, and I think that's, very important to know. I'm sure you all have things to say about it, and certainly we'll hear it, but the article is what the article is. The selectmen closed the warrant on Tuesday night, and the only way to change anything in it at this point would to be do it live on town meeting floor.
Thank you.
So,
That was very helpful.
little disclaimer.
That was an excellent summary, Jeff. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
No.
Nope. Anything from the public?
I answered them all, huh?
It's her birthday, so she is appreciative. If you're gonna speak, if you could come up, so you can either do the podium or the table and just state your name and address, please.
I'm Mark Small from 111 South Street, and I just had a question about when you were being briefed by the police from Brookline. Did they discuss social impacts of these retail operations in a given town?
I actually can't answer that question because I was on medical leave during that.
And by social impacts, do you mean like
How we can get an answer.
what do you call it, the value of homes and crime and that type of thing?
More crime or disruption, social disruption.
They basically said that was, so I can say that crime was a non-factor. They were surprised about
And
that.
actually, the home, sorry, I didn't mean to
Go ahead,
interrupt, the home values went up by 7%.
I think, Mark, in fairness, probably it might be a little early for some of those judgments at this point.
Well, they have they've done the research.
Brookline
Brookline was right at the beginning, so, yeah, there haven't been.
I know, like initially they had some trouble because that was one of the first that opened, so I know they had a lot of lines. You know, they were dealing with crowds up front, but I know they said that since now that it's spread out and you're not seeing those crowds, it's minimal, if any, impact, really. They're not having the problems around there. Specific others, like I didn't know if you were talking about, you know, sort of trickle downs and whatnot. I don't have that specific answer. But I know, like, around the operation, it's not causing any disruptions, and I know the police really, I think they have 4, and they're just not even really having a problem with them.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate the question. Anybody else?
I have a note here. It didn't hurt the town, and they did not see a pickup in crime there, and they're actually adding another one. So that's someone who was at the meeting, so.
If you could just come up and state your name and address, please.
Matt Noon, 110 South High Street. I'm a wellness teacher at the Ahern Middle School, and I remember the day that they legalized marijuana in the state, and it was tough as an educator to deal with that as far as an education, and I'm just curious, I'll keep it really short. Is any of this money at all, like I saw the profit, is there any of it going to go directly back to education, to the schools? Is there a way we can incorporate that so that it does go back and we can?
We
I
can't
think you'd have to do a
incorporate it
motion
into
on the
the-
town meeting floor, but
Yeah.
that reminds me almost of like what happened with like the meals tax, right? And the hotels tax
We
where it
can't,
was
we can't make
earmarked.
any changes to the town warrant, so that would have to be something that gets brought up on town meeting floor. But honestly, my recommendation is that would come
Well, I think
secondary
that's
to it
bigger
passing.
people than me, to be honest. I'm just asking the question.
No, it's a good question. It's a
Thank you.
very
I
fair
think it's a good
question.
Yeah, it's a selective decision.
Could be, though. Lee?
Lee Nichols, 24 Wall Street. I mean, I've lived in this town a long time, and you said that this whole process was like you're rushing to do it. You know, you were saying like you were hurrying to, and you said that the ratio to pot shops or whatever this is like you have so many liquor stores to so many. I'm saying, do we really need this? If you're only going to have 2, and you can go to Plainville, and you can go to the Mansfield, and you can go to these. I mean, do we really need to deal with all this extra stuff? I know the revenue, everybody's thinking revenue, but I know my taxes haven't gone down at all. So I'm saying that if this money's gonna go anywhere, and I don't know where it's going, I'd just like to know a little bit more about where all the cash and everything's going.
We don't.
That'll be a town meeting discussion.
I'm not trying to put anybody on the
No,
spot.
it's just we don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I'm just raising some questions.
Yeah,
and-
those are good questions to ask on the town meeting floor.
Thank you.
But I think it's safe to say your taxes won't be going down.
You never know. You never know.
Got the stadium.
Right. Anybody want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
Are we all set?
Yep. Go ahead.
Then I'd make a motion that we close the public hearing on the zoning article for marijuana commerce.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion to make a positive recommendation?
I'll make a motion to make a positive recommendation for warrant article to change the code of the town of Foxborough, section 162-7, and zoning bylaw, section 7.5.
I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 You guys have any reasons? You know I always need a bullet point or two for my letter.
Well, I thought the chairman will be making a report at town meeting on that.
Yeah, but I write it.
That's lovely to know. Well, you know, due to the research that was done to support the lack of negative impact on the town, to, you know, meet the needs of applicants who have come forward,
Paige, I would just reiterate what I had said. Should this pass muster with voters, that we feel very confident this is a
positive.
a responsible framework, regulatory framework for moving forward.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And I think also that, we took a very cautious approach when this was first brought to us in 2018, and the town voted because there was so many unknowns and there wasn't tight structure around it. And, in the past 5 years, that has changed significantly.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Bessie, would you like to come back?
We have to.
Yeah, we gotta let him back.
Thank you, folks, for coming. I mean, it seems kind of anticlimactic, actually.
Well, they're not here for that, Jeff. They're here for the next one.
You think?
Oh, yeah.
Well, those people were. Thank you, bye.
I was actually here for